The day my mother died, Aunt Eliza wore red to the funeral. Not a subtle burgundy or muted crimson. No, she chose a dress the color of fresh blood. As I stood beside the open grave, watching the priest's lips move in silent prayer, all I could focus on was that garish splash of color against the gray November sky. My name is Tessa, and I never thought I'd be fighting my own family for what was rightfully mine. She would have wanted you to have this, Eliza said, pressing a folded document into my trembling hands after the service. Her perfectly manicured nails scraped against my palm. The will, dear. Your mother left clear instructions about the vineyard. I unfolded the paper, my vision blurring as I scanned the contents. The words seemed to swim before my eyes. Hereby transfer full ownership of Stone Valley Vineyard to Eliza Hughes. This can't be right, I whispered, looking up at my brother Lucas, who stood nearby with his hands shoved deep in his pockets. Mom always said the vineyard would stay in the direct family line. Eliza's lips curved into what might have passed for a sympathetic smile. Grief can play tricks on our memories, darling. Your mother and I discussed this extensively during her final days. She knew I would honor her legacy. When? I demanded, my voice stronger now. When did you discuss this? I was with her every day in the hospital. Not every day, Eliza corrected softly. You were away at that dig site in Crete when she took a turn for the worse. Remember, the guilt hit me like a physical blow. I had been in Crete, excavating a promising Bronze Age settlement, when Mom's condition deteriorated. By the time I made it back, she was barely conscious. Lucas, I turned to my brother. Did Mom say anything to you about this? He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes. I don't know, Tess. Everything happened so fast. The vineyard is already sold, Eliza announced, dropping this bomb with calculated casualness. The new owners take possession next week. They're planning to modernize the whole operation. Very exciting. Sold? The word came out as a strangled gasp. You sold our family's heritage without even telling us. The estate needed to be settled quickly, Eliza said, her voice hardening. Your mother's medical bills weren't going to pay themselves. I clutched the will tighter, my archaeological training kicking in as I studied the document more carefully. Something wasn't right. The paper was crisp, too new, and the signature, this isn't Mom's handwriting, I said slowly. I've seen her signature thousands of times. This isn't it. Eliza's face tightened almost imperceptibly. Don't be ridiculous. Otis handled everything legally. Didn't you, Otis? The family lawyer materialized at her elbow, looking uncomfortable. Everything appears to be in order, Miss Stone. I understand this is difficult. Difficult? I laughed, the sound harsh and foreign to my own ears. You're stealing our mother's legacy, Aunt Eliza. The vineyard isn't just land. It's our history, our home. I'm doing what's best for everyone, Eliza snapped, her composed mask slipping for just a moment. The vineyard was failing. Your mother was sentimental, holding on to a dying business. I'm being practical. Mom would never. Mom's dead. Lucas cut in, his voice rough with emotion. Maybe we should just let it go, Tess. I stared at my brother in disbelief, then back at the will in my hands. That's when I noticed something else. A slight discoloration in the corner of the paper, as if something had been erased. My trained eye for detail caught what others might have missed. I want to see the original, I said firmly. And Mom's other papers. Everything's been packed away, Eliza said quickly. Besides, you need to focus on grieving, dear. Let me handle the practical matters. I looked around at the dispersing funeral guests, at Lucas's defeated posture, at Eliza's triumphant smile, poorly disguised as sympathy. My cousin Hannah caught my eye briefly, before looking away, her face troubled. This isn't over, I said quietly, locking eyes with my aunt. Mom protected that vineyard her whole life. She wouldn't give it away, especially not to you. Eliza's smile never wavered. Careful, dear. Grief can make us say things we regret. Why don't you go home and rest? I'll have the rest of your mother's things sent over tomorrow. I watched her walk away, That red dress a beacon among the somber blacks and grays. Lucas touched my arm gently. Come on, Tess, let's go home. But home was the vineyard, the sprawling stone house where I grew up, the ancient vines that had sustained our family for generations. And I knew with absolute certainty that my mother had left more than just this suspicious will behind. She had been too clever, too careful with our heritage, to let it slip away so easily. I tucked the document into my pocket, my mind already racing with possibilities. Eliza might have won this battle, but she had no idea what she'd just started. After all, I'd spent my career unearthing buried secrets, and I was about to dig up some of our own. 3 days after the funeral, I found myself picking through cardboard boxes of Mom's belongings in my tiny apartment. Each item felt like a punch to the gut. Her favorite coffee mug, a half-used bottle of perfume, stacks of handwritten recipes. But I wasn't looking for mementos. I was searching for answers. "You're obsessing," Lucas said from my doorway, making me jump. I hadn't heard him come in. "This isn't healthy, Tess." I held up a bundle of letters, tied with faded blue ribbon. "Look at these." Mom kept every piece of correspondence about the vineyard. Tax records, harvest reports, everything. Why would she suddenly decide to give it all away? Lucas sighed and dropped onto my couch. Maybe she was trying to spare us the burden. Running a vineyard isn't exactly compatible with your archaeological expeditions. That's what Eliza wants you to think, I shot back, pulling out a letter dated just 2 months ago. Listen to this. My dearest children, the vineyard isn't just land and vines. There's so much more you need to know. I looked up at Lucas. She never finished writing it. But does this sound like someone planning to sell? Let me see that. Lucas leaned forward, finally showing interest. He scanned the letter, frowning. Wait, there's something else here. She mentions meeting with Otis about securing the future. What does that mean? A knock at the door interrupted us. Hannah stood there, looking nervous. I hope I'm not interrupting. Hannah. I hadn't seen my cousin since the funeral. What are you doing here? She glanced over her shoulder before stepping inside, closing the door quickly. I had to come. I overheard something. Mom was on the phone last night, arguing with someone about a clause in the will, a real will. My heart jumped. What exactly did she say? I couldn't hear everything, but she kept saying, they can't find out about the heritage clause, and something about historical preservation. Hannah twisted her hands together. Tessa, I think Mom did something terrible. We need to get into the vineyard, I said, already grabbing my jacket, before the new owners take possession. Are you crazy? Lucas stood up. That's trespassing. It's still our property until the sale closes, I argued. Hannah, will you help us? She nodded slowly. Mom's at a realtor's meeting all afternoon. I can get you in. The drive to Stone Valley Vineyard was tense. Every curve in the road brought back memories. Helping Mom during harvest, learning to prune the vines, countless family dinners on the terrace overlooking the valley. As we approached the main gate, I noticed something odd. The soil's been disturbed, I said, my archaeologist's eye catching the subtle signs. Someone's been digging near the old olive grove. Hannah used her key to let us in, and we made our way through the rows of dormant vines. The November wind whipped around us, carrying the scent of earth and decay. Near the olive grove, I dropped to my knees, examining the ground. Here, I called out, brushing away loose soil. The earth's different here, looser. Tessa, we shouldn't. Lucas started, but I was already digging with my hands. 6 inches down, my fingers struck something solid. I carefully cleared away more soil, revealing a small metal box. My hands trembled as I lifted it out. Is that? Hannah whispered. Inside was an antique brooch, intricately designed with grape motifs, and a folded piece of paper. The note was in Mom's handwriting. For my children. Follow the vine to its root. The truth lies in the earth. Mom knew, I breathed. She knew Eliza would try something. This is a message. Lucas took the brooch, studying it. I remember this. Mom used to say it was older than the vineyard itself, Because it is, I realized, excitement building. This design, it's Byzantine. This brooch could be centuries old, which means the vineyard might be on historical ground. Hannah finished, her eyes wide. If it's declared a heritage site, Eliza couldn't sell it, I said triumphantly. And any sale contract would be void if historical artifacts were found on the property. A car door slammed in the distance. Hannah grabbed my arm. That's Mom's car. You have to go. We hurried back through the vines, but not before I spotted Eliza striding toward the house, phone pressed to her ear. Even from a distance, her angry gestures told me something had gone wrong with her plans. Back in my apartment, I carefully wrapped the brooch in cloth. I need to talk to my mentor, Freya. She's an expert in Byzantine artifacts. If this brooch is what I think it is, you really think you can stop the sale? Lucas asked, but his voice had lost its skepticism. I held up Mom's note. She left us a trail to follow, Lucas. She trusted us to find it. I looked at Hannah. Thank you. I know how hard this must be. She squared her shoulders. Mom's wrong about this. I want to help make it right. I nodded, hope rising in my chest for the first time since the funeral. Mom hadn't just left us a vineyard. She'd left us a mystery to solve. And solving mysteries was exactly what I did best. This isn't just any brooch, Freya said, adjusting her magnifying glass as she examined the artifact in her university office. Look at the craftsmanship, the detail in these grape clusters. This is museum quality. I leaned forward, watching my mentor's face carefully. So it's authentic, Byzantine era, without a doubt. Freya set down the magnifying glass and fixed me with her piercing gaze. Tessa, where exactly did you find this? Buried at my family's vineyard. I explained about Mom's death, Eliza's suspicious will, and the hidden message. Mom was trying to tell us something about the vineyard's history. Freya's eyes lit up. Your mother visited me 3 weeks before she died. She was asking about historical preservation laws and archaeological sites in the region. Now I understand why. My heart raced. What did you tell her? That any property with significant historical artifacts would be protected under heritage laws. Freya pulled out her laptop. A find like this brooch could trigger an automatic archaeological survey, halting any development or sale. Exactly what we need, I said, hope building. But we'd need more than just the brooch, wouldn't we? A knock interrupted us. Hannah burst in, out of breath. Tessa, Mom knows something's wrong. She's meeting with the buyers right now, trying to rush the sale through. Freya raised an eyebrow. Your cousin. She's on our side, I assured her. Hannah, this is Freya, my mentor. She just confirmed the brooch is Byzantine. There's more, Hannah said, dropping into a chair. I found something in Mom's study last night. Correspondence with developers. They're not planning to modernize the vineyard. They're going to tear it all down for a resort complex. The news hit me like a physical blow. She's not just stealing our inheritance. She's destroying it completely. Not if we can prove the historical significance, Freya interjected. She turned her laptop around, showing a satellite view of the vineyard. Look at this topographical pattern. These regular indentations near your olive grove. They could indicate buried structures. A Byzantine settlement, I asked, archaeological training kicking in. Possibly, the brooch suggests wealthy inhabitants. Freya marked several points on the map. We need to do a proper survey, but first, we need permission from the property owner, which is still technically Eliza. I groaned. Not necessarily, Hannah said slowly. I heard Mom talking to her lawyer. There's some issue with the deed transfer, something about a waiting period. Freya's eyes narrowed. If the sale isn't final, we might have grounds for an emergency archaeological survey, especially if we can prove prior knowledge of historical artifacts. Mom knew, I said firmly. That's why she buried the brooch. She was leaving us evidence. My phone buzzed. A text from Lucas. Eliza, at vineyard with surveyors. Looking at Olive Grove area. Hurry. She's going to destroy the evidence, I realized, jumping up. Hannah, can you get us back in? Better, Hannah replied. I made copies of the keys to the wine cellar. Mom never changes those locks. I'm coming with you, Freya announced, packing up her equipment. If we find anything, you'll need an expert witness. We raced to the vineyard, parking down the road to avoid detection. Hannah led us through a back entrance to the wine cellar, the musty air thick with history and fermenting grapes. The cellar connects to the old storage tunnels, Hannah whispered. They run under the olive grove. Perfect for a preliminary survey, Freya murmured, pulling out ground-penetrating radar equipment from her bag. Let's see what's down here. We moved through the dimly lit tunnels, Freya taking readings, while I examined the ancient stonework. Suddenly she stopped. Look at this, she said, showing us the radar screen. These readings suggest a larger chamber beyond this wall, and these patterns, these are consistent with Byzantine construction techniques. A crash echoed from above, followed by the rumble of heavy machinery. They're starting demolition, Hannah gasped. Mom's not even waiting for the sale to close. She can't do that, Freya said sharply. Not without proper permits. She pulled out her phone, dialing quickly. This is Dr. Freya Dean from the University Archaeological Department. I need to report an emergency at Stone Valley Vineyard. We have evidence of significant Byzantine artifacts at risk of destruction. While Freya talked, I pressed my hand against the ancient stone wall, feeling the weight of centuries. Mom knew all of this was here. She was protecting more than just a vineyard. Hannah touched my arm. Tessa, there's something else you should know. Last week, I overheard Mom talking about another will. The real one. She said she had to take care of it before anyone found out about some special clause. Where would she hide something like that? I wondered aloud. Footsteps echoed through the tunnel. Lucas appeared, breathing hard. They've stopped the demolition. Heritage officers are on their way. He looked at Freya's equipment, then at the radar readings. Did you find something? More than something, Freya said, smiling. We found exactly what your mother wanted you to find. Now we just need to prove she left you the legal right to protect it. I stared at the radar image, at the hidden chamber waiting to be discovered. Somewhere in this vineyard, our mother had left us both our heritage and the means to reclaim it. We just had to keep digging. The heritage officers arrived within the hour, their presence forcing Eliza to halt all demolition work. I watched from the vineyard's stone terrace as she argued with them, her face growing redder by the minute. This is ridiculous, she snapped when I approached. A worthless old brooch doesn't make this place historic. The ground-penetrating radar suggests otherwise, Freya said, stepping forward with her data. We've identified what appears to be a significant Byzantine structure beneath the property. One of the heritage officers, a stern woman named Dr. Palmer, studied the readings. This definitely warrants a full archaeological survey. All development work must cease immediately. You can't do this, Eliza hissed. I have contracts signed. Actually, Dr. Palmer replied, any contracts would be void if you failed to disclose known historical artifacts on the property. Did you declare the Byzantine brooch in your sale documents? Eliza's face went pale. I wasn't aware of any artifacts. Really? I pulled out Mom's letter, because Mom's letter specifically mentions the vineyard's heritage. The letter you made sure I never saw until after the funeral. Lucas appeared from the wine cellar, carrying a dusty wooden box. Found this hidden behind the old wine racks. Look familiar, Aunt Eliza. She flinched as Lucas opened the box, revealing stacks of paper and photographs. Those are private family documents. They're evidence, I corrected, pulling out a yellowed photograph. Look, Dr. Palmer, this shows the brooch being worn by my great-grandmother. The caption mentions it being a family treasure from the old ruins. There's more, Hannah said quietly, stepping forward. Mom, I found your meeting notes with the developers. You knew about the archaeological significance. You were planning to destroy the evidence before anyone could stop the sale. Eliza whirled on her daughter. You went through my private files? I had to know the truth, Hannah replied, standing her ground. Just like I heard you talking about Mom's real will, the one you made disappear. Dr. Palmer raised her eyebrows. These are serious allegations. If there's evidence of deliberately concealing historical artifacts, this is all a misunderstanding, Eliza cut in smoothly. I'm sure we can work something out. Tessa, dear, why don't we discuss this privately? No more private discussions, I said firmly. No more secrets. Mom wanted the truth to come out. That's why she left us clues. A sleek black car pulled up the driveway, and a man in an expensive suit stepped out. My heart sank as I recognized him. Robert, Eliza's favorite private investigator. Right on time, Eliza smiled. Robert has some interesting information about your recent activities, Tessa. Trespassing, theft of private documents. Actually, Robert said, straightening his tie, I'm here about a different matter. He pulled out a thick envelope. Your sister, Tessa's mother, hired me 3 months ago to document certain financial irregularities in your management of family trusts. Eliza's smile froze. What? She knew, I breathed. Mom knew what you were planning. Robert handed the envelope to Dr. Palmer. This includes evidence of previous attempts to seize family properties through fraudulent documentation. I believe it's relevant to your investigation. Eliza lunged for the envelope, but Lucas caught her arm. It's over, Aunt Eliza. Mom made sure of that. You don't understand, she snarled. This vineyard was wasted on your mother. She refused to see its potential. The resort deal would have made us all rich. The vineyard was never about money, I said quietly. It was about preserving our heritage, all of it. The vines, the history, the truth about our family. Dr. Palmer finished reviewing Robert's documents. We'll need statements from everyone. In the meantime, I'm ordering a complete halt to any sale or development plans, pending a full archaeological survey. You can't do this to me, Eliza whispered, but her voice had lost its power. Hannah touched her mother's arm. You did this to yourself, Mom. And to all of us. As heritage officers began marking off areas for the survey, I walked to the old olive grove, where we'd found the brooch. Lucas joined me, holding Mom's wooden box. There's something else in here, he said, pulling out a sealed envelope. It's addressed to both of us. Before we could open it, a voice called out, Miss Stone? An elderly man in a tweed jacket approached. I'm Professor Marcus from the National Museum. Dr. Dean contacted me about your Byzantine finds. I believe your vineyard may be sitting on one of the most significant historical sites discovered in this region. I looked at the sealed envelope in Lucas's hands, then at the vineyard stretching out below us. Somewhere in these hills lay not just our family's past, but pieces of a much older story, one Mom had died protecting. Professor, I said, I think we're going to need your help uncovering exactly what my mother wanted us to find. The envelope felt heavy in my hands as we walked back to the house. Whatever secrets it contained, one thing was clear. Mom had left us far more than just a vineyard. She'd left us the truth, buried like treasure, waiting for us to dig it up. The sealed envelope sat on the kitchen table of the vineyard house, while Lucas and I stared at it. Through the window, we could see the archaeological team setting up their equipment. Professor Marcus directing them with enthusiastic gestures. Should we open it? Lucas asked, his hand hovering over the envelope. Before I could answer, someone knocked on the door. A tall, elderly woman stood there, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. I'm looking for Tessa and Lucas. I'm your great-aunt Marina. We don't have a great-aunt Marina, I said, suspicious after everything with Eliza. The woman smiled, pulling out an old photograph. Your mother wrote to me last month. She said you might need this. The photo showed a much younger Marina standing next to our grandmother, both holding the Byzantine brooch between them. My hands shook as I took it. Why didn't we know about you? Lucas asked, letting her in. Eliza made sure of that, Marina said grimly. After your grandmother died, she worked hard to isolate your mother from the rest of the family, especially those of us who knew about the vineyard's true history. I gestured to the envelope. Is that what's in here? The true history? Open it, Marina urged. Your mother wanted you to have all the pieces before confronting Eliza. Lucas carefully broke the seal. Inside were several documents and a letter in Mom's handwriting. My dearest children, Lucas read aloud. If you're reading this, you've already discovered the brooch and probably know about the Byzantine ruins. But that's only part of the story. Our family has been the guardians of this land for generations, protecting not just the vines, but the history beneath them. The brooch was a key, Marina explained. It marked our family's connection to the Byzantine settlement. Your grandmother was meant to pass this knowledge to your mother officially on her 30th birthday, but Eliza intervened. How? I asked. She convinced your grandmother that your mother was too irresponsible to handle the truth. Then, after your grandmother's death, Eliza produced a will, giving her control of the family records. Marina's eyes hardened. Sound familiar? But Mom figured it out anyway, Lucas said. Yes, and she did what Eliza never expected. She dug deeper. She found me, and together, we uncovered documents proving the vineyard's historical significance. Marina pulled out her phone, showing us an email. This arrived this morning from a historical society in Athens. They've confirmed that the Byzantine settlement under your vineyard was a major trading post. The artifacts there could be priceless. My phone buzzed. A text from Hannah. Mom's meeting with developers again, making threats. Be careful. Eliza won't give up easily, I said. She's got too much invested in that resort deal. That's why your mother left you this, Marina said, pointing to another document in the envelope. It's a heritage protection order she filed secretly last month. Once validated, it would make the vineyard a protected historical site permanently. But it needs the legal property owner's signature, Lucas noted, reading the form. Exactly, Marina smiled. And according to your mother's real will, which I have a copy of right here, the vineyard belongs to both of you, jointly, and immediately upon her death. A commotion outside drew our attention. Freya was rushing toward the house, her face flushed with excitement. Tessa, you need to see this, she burst in, holding up her tablet. The radar survey found something incredible. There's a whole complex of buildings down there, including what looks like a temple. And look at this marking on the wall we uncovered. The image showed a carved symbol, identical to the one on the Byzantine brooch. It's proof, Marina said softly. Proof that our family's connection to this land goes back centuries. Another text from Hannah. Mom hired security. They're on their way to shut down the archaeological survey. She can't, Freya said. Not with these findings. This is now officially a major archaeological site. I picked up Mom's heritage protection order. No, but she'll try. Unless we can prove you're the legal owners before she gets here. Marina finished. I've already called Otis. He's bringing the original will, the real one. He's finally ready to admit he helped Eliza forge the fake one. Lucas grabbed his keys. I'll meet him halfway. We need that will before Eliza's security shows up. I'll call Dr. Palmer, Freya said. With these new findings, she can expedite the heritage protection order. I looked out at the vineyard, at the teams carefully uncovering our family's long-buried history. Mom had known this day would come. She'd planned for it, laid the groundwork, made sure we'd have everything we needed to protect our legacy. Marina, I said, turning to our newly discovered great-aunt, tell us everything you know about our family's history. We need to understand exactly what we're fighting for. She smiled, pulling out more old photographs. It began over 1,000 years ago, when a Byzantine merchant fell in love with this valley. The sound of approaching vehicles echoed up the drive. Time was running out, but for the first time, I knew we held all the cards. Mom had made sure of that. 2 black SUVs rolled up the vineyard's gravel drive, kicking up dust. 4 men in dark suits emerged, heading straight for the archaeological site. Eliza stepped out of the second vehicle, her face set in grim determination. Stop all work immediately, she shouted. This is private property, and you're all trespassing. Dr. Palmer stepped forward, archaeological permits in hand. We have legal authorization to— Not anymore, Eliza cut her off, waving a document. I have a court order demanding all archaeological work cease pending a property rights investigation. That's interesting, Marina called out, descending the house steps. considering the property rights were never yours to begin with. Eliza froze. Marina, what are you doing here? Hello, little sister. Still forging documents to steal what isn't yours? The security team looked uncertainly between the two women. Eliza recovered quickly. This is a private family matter. Please remove these trespassers. Wait. Hannah's voice rang out as she ran up the drive. Mom, stop. Lucas is on his way with Otis. He has the real will. There is no other will. Eliza snapped, but her face had gone pale. Professor Marcus emerged from the dig site, holding something carefully wrapped in cloth. Perhaps this might interest you all. We just uncovered this in the temple chamber. He gently unwrapped a small bronze plaque, covered in Greek text. Freya leaned in, translating. This land, blessed by Providence, shall remain under the protection of the family marked by the grape and vine, guardians of our sacred heritage. The brooch, I breathed. It wasn't just jewelry, it was proof of guardianship. Ridiculous superstition, Eliza scoffed, but her voice wavered. A police car pulled up, followed by Lucas's vehicle. Otis stepped out, clutching a leather portfolio, Lucas right behind him. It's over, Eliza, Otis said wearily. I can't keep lying. He turned to Dr. Palmer and the police officer. I helped Mrs. Hughes forge the will she's been using. The real one is right here, signed and notarized 3 months before her sister's death. You promised me, Eliza hissed. We had a deal. The deal was wrong, Otis replied. Your sister knew you were planning something. She came to me, gave me a chance to make it right. The police officer took the portfolio, examining both wills. Mrs. Hughes, we'll need you to come with us to answer some questions about document fraud. You can't prove anything, Eliza said desperately. The developers have already paid. The contracts are void. Professor Marcus interrupted. Now that we've confirmed this is a protected historical site, the Byzantine temple alone makes this place priceless. And it belongs to us, I said, taking the real will from the officer, just like Mom wanted. To my children, Tessa and Lucas, I leave Stone Valley Vineyard in its entirety, with the sacred duty of protecting both its future and its past. Eliza's security team was already backing away, wanting no part of the legal mess unfolding. Hannah approached her mother slowly. Why? She asked softly. Why did you do this to your own family? Because she never understood what real power was, Marina answered. Our grandmother chose your mother as guardian because she had the heart to protect this place, not exploit it. Take her in, the officer instructed his partner. We'll need statements from everyone. As Eliza was led away, still protesting, Lucas turned to Otis. Why come clean now? Your mother left me a letter too, he admitted. Said she forgave me for what I might be pressured to do, but reminded me that legacy is worth more than money. She was right. Professor Marcus cleared his throat. Miss Stone, with your permission, we'd like to establish a permanent research station here. This site could revolutionize our understanding of Byzantine trade networks. Of course, I said, looking out over the vineyard, where archaeologists were carefully uncovering our family's legacy. But the vines stay. We'll find a way to preserve both the past and the present. That's exactly what your mother would have wanted. Marina smiled. Now shall we open that bottle of wine she set aside for this day? What wine? Lucas asked. Marina led us to the cellar, to a section I'd never noticed before. Behind a false wall was a small chamber containing a single bottle and another envelope. For my children, the note read, to be opened when the truth comes to light. This vintage marks the year I became guardian of our legacy. Share it as you begin your own journey as protectors of this sacred trust. As we gathered in the old kitchen, Lucas, Hannah, Marina, Freya, Professor Marcus, and me, I finally felt the weight of the past few weeks lifting. Mom had known this day would come. She'd prepared us, protected us, and trusted us to finish what she'd started. The wine, when we opened it, was perfect, complex with history, bright with promise, and carrying the essence of generations who had tended these vines before us, just like the legacy we'd fought so hard to preserve. 1 week later, we gathered in the vineyard's main hall for the official reading of Mom's real will. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating the ancient stone walls that had witnessed so many family dramas before this one. Eliza sat in the back corner, her lawyer hovering nervously beside her. She'd been released on bail, pending fraud charges. Hannah sat apart from her mother, closer to where Lucas and I waited near Otis's makeshift desk. "Before we begin," Otis announced, "there's something else you should all see." He nodded to Professor Marcus, who stepped forward with a leather-bound journal. "We found this yesterday in the Byzantine temple chamber," the professor explained. "It's a record-keeper's log, dating back centuries. And look at this family name that keeps appearing." He opened the journal carefully, pointing to a recurring Greek inscription. Marina gasped. "That's our family name, in its original Greek form," she said. "This proves our ancestors really were the temple guardians, which makes this will reading even more significant," Otis said, opening Mom's real will. "Your mother added something remarkable to the standard inheritance terms." Eliza stirred in her chair. "This is absurd. You can't prove that journal is authentic." "Actually," Freya stepped in, "we can. The carbon dating and linguistic analysis confirm it's genuine, and the DNA traces we found match your family line." "If I may continue," Otis raised his voice slightly. "By law, I must read this in its entirety." The room fell silent as he began. "I, Helena Stone, being of sound mind, hereby declare this my last will and testament. To my children, Tessa and Lucas Stone, I leave Stone Valley Vineyard and all its holdings, with the following covenant." My heart raced as Otis revealed the hidden clause Mom had fought so hard to protect. "The vineyard lands, including all archaeological sites contained therein, shall be preserved in perpetuity as a living heritage site, combining active wine production with historical conservation. This sacred trust, passed down through generations of our family, shall continue under the joint guardianship of my children." "There's more," Otis continued. "A letter, specifically addressing recent events." He pulled out a sealed envelope, the same elegant handwriting addressing it to "My dear children," to be read when Eliza shows her true colors. Lucas took the letter with trembling hands and read aloud. "My darling Tessa and Lucas, if you're hearing this, then everything I feared about your aunt has come to pass. But don't judge her too harshly. The burden of knowing our family's true heritage has driven others to desperate acts before." Eliza made a choked sound from her corner. "Eliza," the letter continued, "I know you're there too. I forgive you, sister. Our grandmother chose me as guardian, not because she loved you less, but because she saw in you the same hunger for power that once threatened to destroy our family's legacy. The vineyard was never meant to make us rich. It was meant to make us worthy of the trust placed in us centuries ago." Hannah wiped tears from her eyes as Lucas read on. "To my children, the brooch you found was just the beginning. The temple holds more secrets, stories of our family's promise to protect not just the ruins, but the sacred connection between past and present. The vines growing above are nourished by the same soil that holds our ancestors' dreams. Honor them both." Professor Marcus cleared his throat, "Which brings us to our proposal. The university would like to establish a permanent research center here, working alongside the active vineyard. We'd document both the archaeological heritage and the living winemaking traditions." That's exactly what Mom would have wanted," I managed, looking at Lucas, who nodded. "There's one final item," Otis said. "Regarding the attempted sale," he pulled out another document. "Your mother filed this injunction 3 months ago. Any attempt to sell the property without proper historical disclosure would trigger an automatic criminal investigation." "She knew," Hannah said, staring at her mother. "She knew everything you were planning, and she still tried to protect you, Mom. She gave you a chance to do the right thing." Eliza stood abruptly. "You have no idea what it was like, watching her get everything I deserved. The responsibility, The legacy, the trust, the burden, Marina cut in gently. The sacrifice, the years of putting the vineyard's needs before her own. Did you ever wonder why your sister never married? Why she poured everything into preserving this place? Because she understood what it meant to be a guardian, I said, finally seeing my mother's life choices in a new light. Otis gathered his papers. The will is clear and legally binding. The vineyard and all its holdings passed to Tessa and Lucas Stone, with the stipulated conservation covenant in perpetuity. As the others filed out, Lucas and I stayed behind, watching the afternoon sun paint the ancient walls gold. Through the window, we could see the archaeological team carefully uncovering more of our family's story, while the vineyard workers tended the vines above. Ready for this? Lucas asked quietly. I touched the Byzantine brooch, now hanging around my neck. Mom thought we were, and you know what? I think she was right. The autumn harvest brought with it a sense of renewal. As I walked through the vineyard rows with a clipboard, checking the ripeness of the grapes, archaeological students carefully sifted through soil nearby. The contrast made me smile. Past and present, working in perfect harmony, just as Mom had envisioned. The Merlot section is ready, Lucas called from the next row. Professor Marcus wants to know if we can harvest around the new excavation site. Already coordinated with his team, I replied. They'll mark out safe paths for the workers. A familiar voice carried across the vineyard. Tessa, Lucas. Hannah waved from the stone terrace, standing next to a distinguished-looking woman in a business suit. The Heritage Foundation representative is here. We made our way up to meet them, passing the newly installed information plaques that told visitors about the Byzantine settlement beneath their feet. The temple excavation had become a major archaeological attraction, drawing historians and wine enthusiasts alike. This is remarkable, the heritage representative said, gesturing to where tourists were taking a guided tour of the ruins, while others participated in grape picking. I've never seen historical preservation and active agriculture blend so seamlessly. That's what our mother designed it to be, Lucas explained. A living museum where history stays alive through continuous tradition. Speaking of tradition, Hannah cut in. Have you told them about the education center? I nodded eagerly. We're converting the old storage buildings into classrooms. Students can learn about both viticulture and archaeology. Marina's teaching a course on Byzantine history next semester. And your aunt? The representative asked carefully. I heard there were some legal issues. Eliza took a plea deal, Hannah said quietly. Community service, which she's chosen to do here, helping document our family history with Marina. I think she's finally understanding what this place really means. As if on cue, we spotted Eliza and Marina in the archive room, heads bent together over ancient documents. Through the window, I could see them pointing at something, actually smiling as they talked. The first wine from the new era is almost ready, Lucas said, leading us down to the cellar. We're calling it Guardian's Reserve, blending grapes from the vines directly above the temple ruins. The heritage representative ran her hand along the ancient stone walls. You can feel the history here. This is exactly the kind of living heritage site we want to support. The foundation would be honored to partner with you on future preservation projects. Mom would have loved that, I said, touching the Byzantine brooch at my neck. She always said the vineyard story was still being written. A commotion from above drew us back to the terrace. Professor Marcus was practically bouncing with excitement. You have to see this, he exclaimed, holding up what looked like a small ceramic tablet. We just found it near the temple altar. It's a dedication plaque, naming your family as eternal guardians of this sacred ground. The date, it's from the original founding of the settlement. Freya appeared with her translation equipment. This isn't just a deed, it's a prophecy. It speaks of the family's duty continuing until the vine and stone become one, and the guardians remember their true purpose. Vine and stone, Hannah mused. Like your family name. Like the whole vineyard, I realized. The vines growing from the same stones that housed our ancestors. Mom used to say we don't just grow grapes here, we grow history. The setting sun painted the valley in shades of gold and purple, the same colors that would soon fill our wine glasses. Workers were finishing their day's harvest, while archaeology students carefully covered their excavation sites. Tourists lingered on the terrace, sipping wine while listening to Marina's stories about the Byzantine merchants who once walked these same paths. Delivery for the Stone siblings. A courier appeared with a small package. The return address made my heart skip. It was from Mom's old lawyer in Athens, dated before her death. Inside was a single key and a note. For when you understand what it means to be guardians. Love, Mom. Lucas recognized it immediately. The key to her private wine cave, the one she never showed anyone. We hurried to the hidden chamber Marina had shown us before. The key fit perfectly. Inside, the walls were covered with photos, generations of our family tending the vines, discovering artifacts, preserving history. And in the center, a rack of wine bottles, each tagged with a note about significant moments in the vineyard's history. Look at this empty space. Hannah pointed to a gap in the rack. There's a label. I read it aloud. Reserved for the first vintage of the new guardians. May you blend the wisdom of the past with the promise of the future. Lucas squeezed my shoulder. I think we're doing exactly that. Outside, the evening light caught the ancient stones and ripening grapes, weaving them together in a tapestry of past and present. The vineyard had survived centuries of change, protected by generations of guardians who understood that some treasures are meant to be shared, not sold. Mom had known that all along. She'd trusted us to discover it for ourselves, to become the guardians she knew we could be. And standing there, surrounded by the legacy she'd protected for us, I finally understood why.
I still remember the day Emma was born. I was 5, and Mom and Dad told me I was going to be a big sister. They said it would be wonderful, that I'd have a best friend for life. What they didn't mention was that I'd also become invisible. My name is Paula, and growing up in the Mitchell household meant learning early on that there was a clear hierarchy, Emma at the top, and me somewhere below the family dog. It wasn't subtle either. Every morning, Mom would make Emma's breakfast to order: 2 eggs, sunny side up, toast cut diagonally, just how my princess likes it, while tossing me a box of cereal. The differences showed up everywhere. When I needed braces, Dad complained about the cost for months. 2 years later, Emma needed them too, and suddenly money was no object. They even got her the fancy clear ones I'd begged for but been denied. My straight A's were met with distracted nods, while Emma's C+ in math earned her a celebratory dinner at her favorite restaurant. Birthday parties were another sore spot. Mine were simple affairs: supermarket cake, a few friends in the backyard. Emma's? They were full-blown productions with bounce houses, hired entertainers, and custom-made cakes. I once overheard Mom telling her friend, "Well, Emma just appreciates these things more. Paula's so practical." The worst part was watching Emma change. She started out as a sweet kid. We used to build blanket forts together and make up silly stories. But year after year of being treated like she could do no wrong took its toll. By the time she hit middle school, she'd become exactly what you'd expect. "Paula, where's my blue sweater?" she'd demand, ransacking my closet without permission. "That's mine, Emma. Mom bought it for my birthday." "Well, I need it for Jessica's party." "Mom, Paula won't share." And inevitably, "Paula, don't be selfish. Let your sister borrow it." I learned to pick my battles, to expect nothing, to find validation elsewhere. School became my sanctuary. While Emma was being showered with praise for participating in the school play, she had 2 lines: I was winning science fairs, acing AP classes, and quietly building my escape plan. When my acceptance letter from State University arrived, full scholarship, I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd be proud. Instead, dinner that night was dominated by Emma's dramatic retelling of her 7th grade student council election campaign. "Mom, I got a full scholarship," I tried to interject during a rare pause. "That's nice, honey." "Emma, sweetie, tell us more about your campaign posters." Those first years at college, I only came home for major holidays, and even then, I'd count the minutes until I could leave. Every visit was the same. Emma's achievements took center stage, while my dean's list standings and internship offers barely warranted a glance. I learned to keep my visits short and my expectations shorter. The moment finals ended each semester, I'd be back in my dorm, where at least my achievements were my own, and nobody compared them to a younger sister's mediocre ones. During my junior year at State, I got a Facebook message that would change my life. "Hey, remember me? Mike Harrison from Kennedy High? I was a senior when you were a freshman." Of course I remembered him, the cute guy from the debate team who'd never given me a second glance back then. We started chatting daily, sharing college stories and memories from high school. He was working as an engineer back in our hometown, and something just clicked between us. After graduation, I moved back home and landed a job at Turner & Associates as a project manager. Mike and I met for coffee my first week back. That coffee turned into dinner, dinner turned into dating, and before I knew it, we were apartment hunting together. The only dark cloud was my parents' continued indifference. They barely acknowledged my new job or relationship, too busy fretting over Emma's college experience. "She's having such a hard time adjusting," Mom would sigh during our rare phone calls. "Not everyone can just breeze through college like you did." But I had Mike's family to make up for it. His parents, Tom and Sarah, welcomed me like the daughter they never had, and his sister Jenny became the sister I'd always wanted Emma to be. They came over for dinner weekly, helped us furnish our apartment, and actually cared about my career progress. "We're so proud of you both," Sarah said at our small wedding 2 years later. It was a simple ceremony in Mike's parents' backyard, just close friends and family. My parents came, of course, but spent most of the reception talking about Emma's summer internship. Life felt perfect. I was excelling at work, happily married, and finally part of a family that valued me. When I got pregnant a couple years after the wedding, I thought things couldn't get any better. Our son, Lucas, was born healthy and beautiful, and Mike seemed every bit the doting father. But something changed after Lucas turned 1. Mike grew distant, started working late, canceled our date nights. I tried to tell myself it was just new parent stress, but deep down, I knew it was more. The confession came on a regular Tuesday evening. I was feeding Lucas in his high chair when Mike walked in, looking like he hadn't slept in days. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice shaking. "I've met someone else. Her name is Rachel. She's a client at work, and I'm in love with her." The divorce was quick and surprisingly civil. Mike moved to Colorado with Rachel, but insisted on paying generous alimony and child support. "I may be a terrible husband," he said during our last meeting, "but I won't be a terrible father." I sat in my lawyer's office after signing the final papers, holding Lucas close. At 2 years old, he was too young to understand why Daddy wasn't coming home anymore. After the divorce, Mike's family became my lifeline. Despite everything that happened with their son, Tom and Sarah remained devoted grandparents to Lucas, and Jenny was the best aunt a kid could ask for. Lucas would light up every time we visited their house, running straight to the toy corner they'd set up specially for him. Tom would get down on the floor to play with trucks, and Jenny always had some new game or craft project planned. My own parents' house was a different story entirely. I tried visiting them occasionally, hoping they'd want to build a relationship with their only grandchild, but it was painful to watch their indifference. "Paula, don't let him touch that vase," Mom would snap, barely looking up from her magazine. "And make sure he doesn't run around too much. He'll scratch the hardwood floors." Lucas would cling to my leg, sensing the cold atmosphere. The contrast became even more stark when Emma would show up during our visits. "There's my successful girl," Dad would beam as Emma breezed in, talking about her new job at some trading company. They'd completely ignore Lucas's attempts to show them his latest drawing, too busy hanging on Emma's every word about office politics and client meetings. Those visits became less and less frequent. Instead, I focused on what I could control, my career and creating a stable, loving home for Lucas. With Jenny and her parents happy to help with childcare, I started taking on more challenging projects at work. The Singapore account is high risk, my boss warned when I volunteered to lead it. No one's been able to close this deal in 3 years. I can do it, I said firmly. And I did. 3 months of late nights, video calls across time zones, and detailed proposals later, I not only closed the deal, but expanded it to twice its original size. More successful projects followed. Each one built my reputation further, until I was the go-to person for our most challenging clients. The promotion to senior account director came with a corner office and a salary that made my eyes water. To Paula Mitchell, my team toasted after I landed the Microsoft account, the miracle worker. The bonus from that deal was the final piece I needed. That weekend, I took Lucas house hunting. This one has a park nearby, the realtor said, showing us a beautiful 3-bedroom apartment. And the school district is excellent. Lucas ran from room to room, excited about having his own space for all his toys. I watched him exploring, calculator app open on my phone as I ran the mortgage numbers one more time. "We'll take it," I said. That night, as I tucked Lucas into his bed at our old apartment for one of the last times, he asked, "Mommy, are we really getting a new home? With my own room?" "With your own room, and a special art corner, and space for all your books." He hugged me tight. "You're the best mommy ever." In that moment, I realized something. While I couldn't change my past or my parents' behavior, I could break the cycle. My son would never doubt his worth or feel second best. It was amazing how quickly things changed after word got out about my promotion and new apartment. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Sweetie, we haven't seen you and Lucas in ages. Why don't you come over this weekend?" I nearly dropped my coffee. This was the same woman who'd spent the last 5 years barely acknowledging my existence. I thought about Lucas, who still asked about his grandparents sometimes. Maybe people can change? The next weekend, I took Lucas to their house. The difference was startling. "There's my favorite grandson," Dad called out as we walked in. Considering Lucas was their only grandson, this wasn't saying much, but still. "Look what Grandma got you." Mom produced a new toy truck, something she'd never done before. "And I made cookies. You do like chocolate chip, right?" Lucas, too young to remember their previous indifference, was delighted. I watched as my mother actually got down on the floor to play with him, something I'd never seen her do before. "Paula, honey," Mom said later, while Lucas was occupied with his new truck, "we'd love to have him over more often. Maybe some weekends? You must need a break sometimes." It was surreal, but I decided to go with it. What was that saying about not looking a gift horse in the mouth? Over the next few months, my parents became surprisingly involved grandparents. They started asking for Lucas to stay over on weekends, and I used that time to catch up with Jenny. "You seem happier," Jenny observed during one of our shopping trips. "More relaxed." "It's nice seeing them finally make an effort," I admitted. "Even if I know why." The why became clearer when the requests started coming. Small at first, Mom needed help with a plumbing bill, Dad's watch needed repair. Little things that were easy enough to cover with my new salary. "Of course I'll help," I said each time, remembering all the dance lessons and summer camps they'd paid for Emma but denied me. It felt good, in a way, to be the one they turned to now. Then I heard about Emma through the family grapevine. Her job at the trading company wasn't going as planned. She'd been passed over for several promotions. "It's just office politics," Mom defended during one of our new regular family dinners. "They don't recognize talent there." The requests for money grew larger. A new refrigerator, home repairs. Then came the big one. "Sweetheart," Dad said one Sunday, while Lucas was napping upstairs, "we've been thinking of getting a new car. The payments would be a bit steep for us, but with your new position." "How much?" They named a figure that would have made me choke a year ago. Now, it was manageable. "We'll pay you back," Mom assured me, but we both knew they wouldn't. I agreed anyway. Maybe it was validation I was buying, or maybe I just wanted to prove something to myself. Either way, I started sending them a check each month for the car payments. "Just be careful," Jenny told me over coffee the next day. "Money has a way of complicating things." I nodded, but inside I was thinking, how complicated could it get? I had more than enough, and if buying my parents' attention meant Lucas got to have grandparents in his life, wasn't that worth it? It started as a normal Tuesday at work. I was in the middle of a client presentation when the first wave of pain hit, sharp and sudden, making me double over in my chair. "Call an ambulance," I heard someone say. "She's white as a sheet." Everything after that became a blur of movement and voices. The paramedics arrived quickly, helping me onto a stretcher while I tried to focus through the waves of pain. "Classic appendicitis symptoms," one of them said. "We need to get her to Memorial right away." Through the haze of pain, one crystal clear thought broke through: Lucas. He needed to be picked up from school in 2 hours. At the hospital, the diagnosis was quick and definitive. "Your appendix needs to come out," the doctor said. "We've got an already. You'll need to stay for at least 2 days post-surgery." "I need to make a call first," I managed to say. "My son." The nurse handed me my phone, and I dialed Mom's number with shaking fingers. She picked up on the 4th ring. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm in the hospital. It's my appendix, they need to operate right away. Could you please pick up Lucas from school? I'll need someone to watch him for a couple of days while I recover." There was a pause, then, "Oh, honey, that's not possible. Your father and I are getting ready for Emma's promotion party. She finally made junior executive at her company." The pain in my stomach was nothing compared to the one in my chest. "Mom, please, I need help. Lucas needs to be picked up in less than 2 hours." "Well, that's really not our problem," she said, her voice suddenly cold. "We are in a hurry to go to a restaurant where there will be 50 people. We can't be babysitting." "Babysitting? He's your grandson." "Look, Paula," she sighed, as if I was being unreasonable. "Lucas is your responsibility. He's always being so noisy and touching everything, it's really quite a burden." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "A burden? After everything I've done for you? I've been paying your car loan for the past year. Every time you needed money." She cut me off with a laugh that chilled me to the bone. "Oh, we won't be needing your handouts anymore. Emma's new position comes with an excellent salary. She's gonna help us, instead of you." The line went dead. I lay there in the hospital bed, phone still pressed to my ear, tears mixing with sweat on my face. All those months of helping them, all that money, all those weekends of playing happy family, and this was what it came down to. The moment someone better came along, Lucas and I were back to being inconvenient afterthoughts. The nurse touched my arm gently. "Ms. Mitchell? We really need to prep you for surgery now." I nodded, already pulling up Jenny's number on my phone. She picked up on the first ring. "Jenny?" My voice cracked. "I'm in the hospital, appendicitis. They're prepping me for surgery. Could you please pick up Lucas from school? I hate to ask, but..." "Text me the school details," she cut in immediately. "What time does he need to be picked up?" 2:30, Jenny, I'm so sorry to impose." "Stop it. Lucas is my nephew. Of course I'll get him. We'll have a sleepover at my place, won't we? He loves playing with Max anyway." I could hear her grabbing her keys in the background. "Thank you," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "I called my parents first, they..." "Tell me later," she said firmly. "Focus on getting better. Lucas will be fine with me, I promise." The next thing I remember was waking up in recovery, groggy from anesthesia. My first coherent thought was about Lucas, but there was already a text from Jenny waiting. "Lucas is having a blast. We made pizza and built a blanket fort." Don't worry about anything except getting well. She sent photos over the next 2 days, Lucas playing with her dog Max, helping her bake cookies, falling asleep amid a pile of stuffed animals. Each one made my heart squeeze with gratitude. When I was finally discharged, Jenny drove me to her house. Lucas ran to me the moment I walked in, stopping just short when he remembered I was ouchy. "Mommy, Aunt Jenny let me help make breakfast every morning." And Max slept in my blanket fort. Jenny helped us get home, stocked our fridge, and promised to check in daily. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of recovery, with Jenny bringing over meals and keeping Lucas entertained when I needed rest. One evening, scrolling through social media during Lucas's bedtime story, I saw them, dozens of photos from Emma's promotion party, posted the same day I was in the hospital. Mom and Dad beaming proudly beside Emma in her designer dress. Champagne toasts. An elaborate cake. Everyone laughing and celebrating while I lay in a hospital bed, their grandson dismissed as a burden. That night, after Lucas was asleep, I sat down at my computer. First, I canceled the automatic monthly transfer to my parents' account for their car payment. Then I blocked them on every social media platform. Looking at the framed photo on my desk, Lucas and me at the park, both laughing as Jenny's dog Max chased bubbles around us, I felt something shift inside me. All these years, I'd been trying to buy my parents' love with money and tolerance. But real family? Real family picks you up from the hospital. Real family builds blanket forts with your kid. Real family shows up. 3 months have passed, and life had fallen into a peaceful rhythm. Jenny and her parents were regular fixtures in our lives, filling our weekends with barbecues, park visits, and movie nights. Then, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, my phone rang. Mom's number flashed on the screen. I stared at it for a moment, my hand hovering over the decline button, before deciding to answer. "Paula?" Mom's voice had that sugary sweet tone she always used when she wanted something. "How are you, sweetheart?" "What do you want, Mom?" A theatrical sigh. "Well, since you ask, your father and I are in a bit of a situation. With the car payments." I felt a laugh bubbling up in my chest, but held it back. "Oh? Yes, you see." She paused for dramatic effect. "We thought Emma would help us, with her new position and all. But when we asked her, she refused. Can you believe it? Said she had her own expenses to worry about. After everything we've done for her." The irony was almost too much. "We were hoping," she continued, her voice getting smaller, "that maybe you could start helping with the payments again? Just until we figure something else out." This time, I couldn't hold back the laugh. It burst out of me, sharp and bitter. "Paula, this isn't funny. We could lose the car." "You know what's funny, Mom? 3 months ago, I was being wheeled into emergency surgery, and you called my son, your grandson, a burden. You couldn't be bothered to help us, because you were too busy celebrating Emma's promotion. The same Emma who now won't give you a dime. We were just busy that day. You know how these events are." "No, Mom. I know exactly what it was. I was useful when I was paying your bills. The moment you thought Emma could replace me as your personal ATM, Lucas and I became inconvenient again. That's not fair. We've always..." "Always what? Always favored Emma? Always treated me like I was second best? Always took my help for granted until something better came along? Paula, please. You called my financial help handouts, remember? Right before you hung up on me when I was in the hospital. Well, guess what? The handouts are over. I'm done trying to buy your love. I'm done watching you treat my son like he's less than Emma's designer handbags. I'm just done." "But the car..." I cut her off with another laugh, this one lighter, almost free. "Not my problem anymore. Goodbye, Mom." I hung up and blocked her number, then did the same with Dad's. Through the open window, I could hear Lucas in the backyard, giggling as he played with Jenny and Max. Real laughter, real love, real family. The calls started coming in waves. First from Mom's phone, then Dad's, when I didn't answer. Their voicemails ranged from tearful pleas to angry demands. The text messages weren't any better. "Paula, please, we're your parents. This is so selfish of you. We'll lose the car because of you." Each message only confirmed I'd made the right decision. Not one of them mentioned Lucas. Not one expressed regret for how they'd treated us. It was all about them, their needs, their car, their feelings. After a week of this, I'd had enough. I blocked their numbers completely, set up email filters to send their messages straight to trash, and finally felt like I could breathe again. "You okay?" Jenny asked one Sunday afternoon as we watched Lucas and Max chase each other around her parents' backyard. Tom was at the grill, and Sarah was setting up the patio table for our weekly family dinner. "You know what? I really am." I accepted the lemonade she offered. I keep waiting to feel guilty or sad, but mostly I just feel free. "You gave them more chances than they deserved," she said, squeezing my hand. "Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away." Mommy, look what Grandpa Tom taught me." Lucas came running over, proudly showing off a new frisbee trick. I watched as Tom abandoned the grill to help Lucas perfect his throw, while Sarah called out encouragement from the patio. This was what family should be, people who show up not just for the good times, but for the hospital runs and school pickups too. These days, I don't know if my parents still have their car, or if Emma finally stepped up to help them. I don't know if they're still throwing elaborate parties or lamenting their ungrateful eldest daughter. I don't check their social media, don't ask mutual acquaintances about them, don't drive by their house when I'm in the neighborhood. What I do know is this: Lucas has never asked about them since that day. Children are intuitive, they know who truly loves them. He has grandparents who never miss his school plays, an aunt who builds blanket forts with him, and a mom who finally learned that love shouldn't come with conditions. Last week, Lucas brought home a family tree project from school. He'd drawn Tom and Sarah right next to me, with Jenny and Max nearby. His father had a small branch of his own. We've kept things cordial there, with regular video calls and holiday visits. But my parents and Emma weren't on the paper at all. "Is this okay, Mommy?" he asked, showing me his work. Ms. Johnson said family trees usually have more people, but I told her these are the only ones we need. I hung his drawing on the fridge, right next to the photo from his last birthday party, all of us around the cake, genuine smiles on every face. "It's perfect, baby," I told him. "Absolutely perfect. Sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you're meant to have. Sometimes you have to let go of the people who should have loved you to make room for the people who actually do." It took me 32 years to learn that lesson, but watching Lucas grow up surrounded by real, unconditional love, I'd say it was worth the wait. My name is Madeline, and 12 years ago, I met James at a business networking event. He was a senior manager at a trading company, charming and intelligent, with kind eyes that made me feel at ease. What really won me over, though, was how he talked about his 13-year-old daughter, Sarah. The love in his voice when he mentioned her name was unmistakable. I'd built my chain of beauty salons from the ground up, and success had brought me everything except what I wanted most, a family. I couldn't have children of my own, a fact I'd learned to live with, but meeting James and Sarah felt like a second chance. We got married 6 months later, and they moved into my house. The income difference between James and me was substantial. I made several times what he did, but it never bothered me. Love isn't about money, and I was just happy to finally have the family I'd always wanted. When Sarah turned 16, I bought her first car, a safe, reliable model that made her squeal with joy. "This is really mine," she'd asked, tears in her eyes as she hugged me. "Thank you, Madeline. You're the best." 2 years later, when college acceptance letters started arriving, I didn't hesitate to offer to pay for her education. It wasn't Harvard, but it was a good school, and Sarah was thrilled. Those early years were beautiful. We were happy. I had everything I'd ever wanted: a loving husband, a stepdaughter who seemed to appreciate me, and a home filled with laughter. Sarah even stayed with us after college, saying she wanted to save money while starting her career. I'll never forget that spring evening when Sarah came home practically glowing with excitement. She'd been dating Michael for 2 years, and I knew him well, a decent young man who worked as a software engineer and treated her like a princess. Still, when she burst through the door waving her left hand with a diamond ring sparkling on it, I was genuinely surprised. "Dad, Madeline," he proposed, she squealed, bouncing on her toes like she was 16 again instead of 25. "We're getting married." James jumped up to hug her while I stood there grinning like an idiot. This was exactly the kind of family moment I'd always dreamed of having. Michael came over later that evening, and we opened a bottle of champagne I'd been saving for a special occasion. "I know this is a big ask," Sarah said, looking nervous as she played with her engagement ring. "But we've been looking at venues and everything, and—" "How much?" I asked, already reaching for my phone to check my accounts. "Well, with everything included, around 150,000, she said quietly, then rushed to add, "But of course, we don't expect—" "Done," I interrupted, smiling. "I'll set up an account tomorrow that you can access for all the wedding expenses." The look of relief and joy on her face made every penny worth it. "Really? Oh my God, Madeline, thank you so much." She threw her arms around me, and I hugged her back tightly, remembering that teenage girl who'd first welcomed me into her life. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of excitement. Sarah included me in everything at first. We'd sit at the kitchen table late into the night, looking at wedding magazines and Pinterest boards. She'd text me pictures of dresses she was considering and ask my opinion on color schemes. "What do you think about these flowers?" she'd ask, showing me photos of elaborate bouquets. "Too much? Not enough?" "I love the pink peonies," I'd say, and she'd make notes in her wedding planner. She found her dream dress, a stunning designer gown that cost more than my first car, and I didn't even blink at the price tag. The way her eyes lit up when she tried it on was worth every cent. The venue she chose was spectacular, an elegant historic hotel downtown with crystal chandeliers and marble floors. The menu she selected featured premium dishes that would impress any food critic. I transferred the money as promised, and Sarah dove into the planning with enthusiasm. But then, about 2 months into the planning, something shifted. The detailed updates became shorter, vaguer. Instead of our long planning sessions, she'd rush through dinner and disappear into her room or go to Michael's place. "How's the planning going?" I'd ask. "Fine," she'd reply, barely looking up from her phone. "Everything's on track." When I'd try to get more specific details, she'd give non-committal answers. "Oh, just finalizing some things." Or, "Don't worry, it's all under control." I told myself not to be hurt by this gradual exclusion. After all, planning a wedding is stressful, and she was probably just overwhelmed. Maybe she needed some space to make her own decisions. I remembered being young and wanting to prove I could handle things on my own. James noticed my concern one night as we got ready for bed. "Everything okay?" he asked. "You seem worried." "I'm probably just being silly," I said, trying to smile. "It's just, Sarah seems different lately. More distant." "She's just busy with the wedding," he assured me, kissing my forehead. "You know how it is, so many details to manage. Try not to worry." I nodded and tried to push my concerns aside. But there was a nagging feeling in my gut that something wasn't quite right. The happy bubble we'd been living in felt like it was starting to develop tiny cracks, and I couldn't shake the sensation that this was just the beginning. As the weeks passed, I decided to take a more active role in the wedding planning again. One morning, over coffee, I casually brought up something that had been on my mind. "Sarah, honey, I was wondering about the guest list," I said, watching her scroll through her phone. "Have you figured out how many people you're inviting?" She looked up briefly. "Oh, yeah, we're keeping it small, about 50 people." That's nice, intimate, I nodded, then added, I'd love to include my parents and my sister. They've always adored you, and they'd be thrilled to be there. The change in Sarah's expression was immediate and startling. Her face hardened, and she put down her phone with deliberate slowness. Actually, we're only inviting close relatives and friends. This is supposed to be a really personal celebration. I don't want to include people who aren't, actually family. The words hit me like ice water. After 12 years, after everything we'd shared, my family wasn't actually family to her? I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice gentle. Sarah, I understand wanting to keep things intimate, but my parents have known you since you were 13. They'd been to every one of your birthdays, your graduation. I paused, then added quietly, and I am paying for the entire wedding. Surely we can make an exception for 3 people who care about you. Her face immediately twisted into a pout, and I could see the anger flash in her eyes at the mention of money. She pushed her chair back from the table with more force than necessary. Fine, she snapped. I'll send invitations to your mom and sister. Happy now? Before I could respond, she grabbed her phone and stormed out of the kitchen. I heard the front door slam a few minutes later. That evening, James came into our bedroom with that look on his face, the one that told me I wasn't going to like what he had to say. We need to talk about what happened with Sarah today, he began, sitting on the edge of our bed. Okay, I said, putting down my book. What about it? She called me crying earlier. Said you were really rude to her about the guest list. She's staying at Michael's tonight because she's so upset. I stared at him in disbelief. Rude to her? James, she told me my family wasn't welcome at her wedding, a wedding I'm paying for, by the way. And I stayed completely calm when I talked to her about it. I know, but maybe you could be a little more gentle with her, he suggested. She's under a lot of stress with the wedding planning. I explained exactly what had happened, word for word, and I could see him processing it. He ran his hand through his hair, something he always did when he was troubled. Okay, he finally said. I see what you mean. I'll talk to her about it tomorrow. The next 2 weeks passed in an uneasy peace. Sarah had returned home and was acting as if nothing had happened, chattering about wedding details over breakfast and asking my opinion about centerpieces again. But something felt off, like the calm before a storm. Then came the bombshell at dinner. So, Sarah said, pushing her pasta around her plate, Mom found out about the wedding. She's back in town. I nearly choked on my wine. James's fork clattered against his plate. In 12 years, Sarah's mother, Linda, had barely been mentioned in our house. I knew the basics. She'd had a drinking problem, which led to the divorce, then moved to Arizona and essentially abandoned Sarah. No birthday cards, no Christmas calls, nothing. She really wants to be involved in the wedding planning, Sarah continued, her voice bright with an enthusiasm I couldn't understand. Actually, I invited her over for dinner this weekend. Here. My hand tightened around my wine glass. This was my house, the house I'd bought with my own money, the house where I'd created a home for us all. The proper thing would have been for Sarah to ask permission before inviting someone over, especially someone with Linda's history. But I remembered the guest list argument and bit my tongue. One more confrontation wasn't worth it. James sat there silently, suddenly very interested in his pasta. That weekend, I spent hours preparing a perfect dinner, herb-crusted rack of lamb, roasted vegetables, homemade bread. I wanted everything to be flawless, though I couldn't explain why I felt the need to impress a woman who'd abandoned her daughter. Linda arrived exactly 30 minutes late. She was tall and blonde like Sarah, but with hard edges where Sarah was soft. Her eyes scanned every inch of my home as she walked in, lingering on the artwork, the furniture, the view from the windows. I recognized the look, envy poorly disguised as appraisal. What a large house, she said, emphasizing large in a way that made it sound like an insult. Dinner started pleasantly enough, but it didn't stay that way. Linda took a bite of the lamb and pursed her lips. She said, cutting another piece with deliberate slowness. You know, I always made this with rosemary and garlic. It really brings out the flavor better. Sarah used to love it when I made it. I took a sip of wine and said nothing. And these vegetables, she continued, pushing them around her plate. They're a bit overdone, aren't they? I always found that keeping them crispy makes them so much more appetizing. With each criticism, I waited for James to say something, anything. He'd been married to this woman, he knew exactly who she was and what she was doing. But he kept his eyes on his plate, cutting his food into smaller and smaller pieces. I sat there, watching this woman criticize my cooking in my own home, while my husband stayed silent and my stepdaughter beamed at her long-lost mother as if she'd hung the moon. Something inside me shifted, hardened. As dinner wound down, Linda dabbed her lips with her napkin and turned to Sarah. So, honey, tell me about the venue. Which hotel did you pick? The Grand Morrison downtown, Sarah replied, brightening at the change of subject. It's beautiful, Mom. They have these amazing crystal chandeliers and... The Grand Morrison? Linda's face wrinkled with distaste. Oh, sweetie, you can't have your wedding there. That place is so basic. Now, the Belmont Plaza, that's where you should be having it. Much more prestigious. I gripped my fork tighter, knowing the Belmont Plaza cost nearly twice what we were already spending. The wedding we're planning isn't exactly cheap, I said, trying to keep my voice level. The Grand Morrison is a lovely venue. Linda's eyes narrowed. Well, you can't cut corners on your only daughter's wedding. It's the most important day of her life. Something inside me snapped. 12 years of love, support, and financial sacrifice reduced to cutting corners by a woman who hadn't sent her daughter so much as a birthday card. If you're so concerned about the venue, I said, meeting her gaze directly, feel free to pay for the Belmont Plaza yourself. Since I'm the one covering the entire $150,000 for this wedding, I think the Grand Morrison will do just fine. The silence that followed was deafening. Linda's face flushed red. She stood up so quickly, her chair scraped against the floor. I can see I'm not welcome here, she announced, grabbing her purse. Sarah, call me tomorrow, honey. She stormed out, the front door slamming behind her. Sarah whirled on me, her face contorted with rage. How dare you, she screamed. How dare you throw the money in Mom's face like that? You're cruel and greedy, and you've ruined everything. She ran upstairs, and I heard her door slam too. I sat there, stunned, as James helped himself to another glass of wine. Later that night, he came to our bedroom looking stern. You need to apologize to Sarah, he said. What you said to Linda was completely out of line. I stared at him in disbelief. Apologize? For what? Telling the truth? Your ex-wife came into my house, criticized everything I did, and then suggested I was being cheap about a wedding I'm paying for entirely on my own. Still, you didn't have to embarrass her like that. And now Sarah's upset. I'm not apologizing, I said firmly. Not this time. He grabbed his pillow. Fine. I'll sleep in the living room until you come to your senses. The next morning, my phone rang while I was making coffee alone in the kitchen. It was my mother. Maddie, honey, she said, her voice concerned. I wanted to ask you about Sarah's wedding. What's the date and venue? Dad and I haven't received an invitation yet, and neither has Jenny. I thought they must have gotten lost in the mail. I sat at the kitchen counter for hours after my mother's call, my coffee going cold beside me. The morning sun crawled across the floor as I waited, my anger building with each passing minute. Around 11, I heard Sarah's key in the lock. She'd been out since breakfast, probably with Linda. Sarah, I called out, my voice steady, despite the rage simmering inside me. We need to talk. She walked into the kitchen, still wearing yesterday's clothes. What is it? She asked, not quite meeting my eyes. I just got a call from my mother, I said, watching her face carefully. She was asking about the wedding invitations, the ones that apparently never arrived. Sarah's expression hardened, a look I'd never seen before crossing her face. She lifted her chin defiantly. I'm not inviting them. Excuse me? I'm not inviting strangers to my wedding, she said, each word deliberately cruel. The word strangers hit me like a physical blow. My parents had been at every Christmas, every birthday, every milestone for 12 years. My sister had helped Sarah prepare for her college interviews. Strangers? That's wrong, Sarah, I said, fighting to keep my voice level. And it's ugly. These people have loved you and supported you for years. She laughed, a harsh, bitter sound I'd never heard from her before. You want to talk about ugly? After what you did to my mom last night? Her eyes flashed with anger. Actually, you know what? I don't want you at my wedding either. Time seemed to stop. The kitchen fell silent except for the quiet hum of the refrigerator. 12 years of love, support, and sacrifice reduced to this moment. Let me make sure I understand, I said slowly. You don't want me, the person paying for your entire wedding, to attend? That's right, she said, lifting her chin higher. I felt an odd sense of calm wash over me. All the hurt and anger of the past few weeks crystallized into perfect clarity. I smiled, which seemed to unnerve her slightly. That's fine, I said, my voice pleasantly light. I won't come to your wedding. Without another word, I walked upstairs to my home office. My hands didn't shake at all as I logged into my banking app and revoked Sarah's access to the wedding account. It took less than a minute, just a few clicks to end what had taken 12 years to build. Next, I called Robert, the wedding planner. He answered on the second ring. Robert, this is Madeline Harrison. I need you to cancel all the wedding arrangements. Excuse me? He sounded bewildered. Is everything all right? No, it's not, I said honestly. But it will be. Please cancel everything and process the refund to my account. The Grand Morrison was my next call. The events manager was apologetic but firm. They couldn't refund the deposit for the food and beverages that had already been ordered. It was a few $1,000s lost, but at that moment, it felt like money well spent. That evening, the house was silent. James was still sleeping in the living room. I could hear him shifting on the couch as I got ready for bed. As I lay there alone in the dark, I realized I didn't feel sad anymore. I felt free. The next morning, I took my time getting dressed. I chose my favorite blue silk blouse and pearl earrings, armor, for what I knew would be a difficult day. When I finally went downstairs for breakfast, the storm broke immediately. Sarah and James were already at the kitchen table, clearly waiting for me. The moment I appeared, Sarah leaped to her feet, her face red with fury. What did you do? She screamed. How dare you cancel my wedding? How dare you block my access to the account? That money was for my wedding. I poured myself a cup of coffee, my hands steady. I'm not going to sponsor a wedding I'm not invited to, I said simply, taking a sip. You can't do this. Sarah's voice rose higher, tears starting to stream down her face. You've ruined everything. The venue, the flowers, the dress, it's all gone. I set my coffee cup down carefully. Actually, I can do this, and I did. Why don't you ask the people you actually want at your wedding to pay for it? Sarah's face crumpled. She let out a horrible, gasping sob and ran from the kitchen. Her footsteps thundered up the stairs, followed by the slam of her bedroom door. James stood up slowly, his face dark with anger. Fix this, he growled. Right now. Call everyone back, reopen the account, and arrange everything again. Or I'll file for divorce. The threat hung in the air between us. 12 years of marriage reduced to this moment. I looked at the man I'd loved, really looked at him, and wondered how I'd never seen this side of him before. Okay, I said calmly. File for divorce, I'm not against it. The color drained from his face. He clearly hadn't expected this response. Madeline, you can't be serious. I am, and since this is my house, I'd like you and Sarah to leave by tomorrow. His anger deflated like a punctured balloon. Look, he said, his tone suddenly conciliatory, I overreacted. We need to talk about this, think it through. I've already thought it through, I interrupted. I'm done living with people who don't appreciate or respect me. I'm done trying to buy love. The rest of the day passed in a blur of slammed doors and muffled arguments upstairs. At exactly 7 that evening, James and Sarah appeared in the foyer with their suitcases. Sarah's eyes were red and puffy from crying. I never thought you could be so cruel, she spat. I felt a laugh bubble up inside me, a genuine laugh of disbelief. Cruel? I paid for your clothes, your car, your education. I gave you a home, loved you like my own daughter, and was ready to spend $150,000 on your wedding. And you have the nerve to call me cruel, because I won't let you treat me like dirt. The door closed behind them with a quiet click, so much gentler than all the angry slams of the past few days. I stood in my foyer, and listened to the silence of my house. The house felt different after they left, lighter somehow, as if a weight I hadn't known I was carrying had been lifted. I spent the first few days reorganizing spaces, reclaiming rooms that had slowly become filled with Sarah's things over the years. It was therapeutic, like cleaning out an old wound. Then came the message from Michael's mother. It popped up on my social media one evening while I was enjoying a glass of wine on my patio. I hope you realize what you've done, the message read. This wedding could fail entirely because of your actions. How can you be so heartless? I took my time responding, choosing my words carefully. I'm not heartless, I wrote back. I'm just done being disrespected. I won't pay for a wedding I'm not even invited to. If you're so concerned about the wedding's success, feel free to pay for it yourself. She read the message, but never replied. I imagined her sitting there, probably as shocked as James had been that I wouldn't back down. It's funny how people react when you finally stand up for yourself, like they can't quite believe you've stopped playing by their rules. I contacted my lawyer the next day. She'd helped me draft the prenup 12 years ago, and now she'd helped me end the marriage it had protected. The divorce papers were ready within a week. When I called James to tell him they were ready, he tried his old tactics again. Maddie, please, he said, his voice soft and pleading, the voice that used to make my heart melt. We can start over. We can fix this. I hung up. He came to get the papers the next morning. He looked older somehow, tired. The confident man who'd threatened me with divorce was gone, replaced by someone who seemed lost. Sarah's been crying nonstop, he said, standing in my foyer, no longer our foyer. The wedding's going to be at City Hall now. No reception, no flowers, no fancy dress. Just a basic ceremony. I shrugged, remembering all the tears I'd shed over their betrayal. That's not my problem. How can you be so cold about this? It's not cold, James. It's just not my responsibility anymore. He took the papers and left. I watched him walk to his car, the car I'd bought him, and drive away. It felt final, but not sad. Just finished. The divorce was completed 2 months later. The prenup made everything simple. He couldn't touch my house, my business, or any of my assets. Sometimes I wondered if he'd ever really read that document, if he'd understood what it meant when he signed it 12 years ago. It didn't matter now. People ask me sometimes if I know how Sarah's wedding went. If she wore the dress she'd chosen, if Linda was there, if it was everything she'd dreamed of. I honestly don't know. I blocked them all on social media, changed my phone number, moved on with my life. What I do know is this: you can't buy love. Not real love, anyway. You can't purchase respect or gratitude or loyalty. I spent 12 years trying to build a family with my checkbook, and in the end, all it got me was a front row seat to watch that family choose someone else over me. But here's the thing about endings: they're also beginnings. My house is peaceful now. My business is thriving. And when I sit in my garden with my morning coffee, watching the sun rise over my flowers, I don't feel lonely. I feel free. I grew up in a small town, in a modest 2-story house with my parents, and my older sister Grace. She was just 2 years older than me, but sometimes it felt like we lived in completely different worlds. My father owned a small cafe that brought in enough to keep us comfortable, while Mom stayed home and occasionally helped out at the restaurant. It wasn't a luxurious life, but we got by. Well, most of us did. Grace, sweetheart, that presentation was absolutely brilliant. I remember Mom gushing one evening after a school event. You're going to go so far in life. You're just so talented. I stood in the doorway, still holding my own certificate from the science fair, but nobody seemed to notice. It was always like that. Grace was the star, and I was the shadow. That was the pattern of my childhood. Grace got the latest iPhone while I inherited her old one with the cracked screen. She wore designer clothes while I got her hand-me-downs. Every family gathering became a showcase of Grace's achievements. Did you hear about Grace's SAT scores? Dad would proudly tell our relatives. Top percentile. And she's president of the debate club too. I learned to fade into the background during these conversations, knowing my straight B's and position as treasurer of the environmental club wouldn't merit a mention. It wasn't that I was doing poorly, I was doing fine. But in our house, fine might as well have been failure. Stella, Mom said to me once, when I was helping her fold laundry, you should really think about practical career options. Maybe something in retail or service? There's nothing wrong with honest work. The word stung, but I'd gotten used to the constant reminders of my perceived limitations. What I hadn't gotten used to was the way they seemed to actively work to reinforce them. Looking back now, I realize that those early years were setting the stage for everything that would follow. The constant comparisons, the subtle put-downs, the clear message that I was somehow less than my sister, it all left marks that would take years to heal. But sometimes the deepest wounds become the strongest motivations, and my family had no idea how their treatment would eventually come back to shape all our futures. I still remember the day Grace got her college acceptance letter. The whole house erupted in celebration. Mom made her favorite dinner, Dad brought home an expensive bottle of wine, and they spent the entire evening making plans for her future. Our brilliant girl is going to one of the best colleges in the city. Mom couldn't stop beaming. We've been saving for this moment since you were born, sweetheart. I sat quietly at the dinner table, pushing food around my plate, trying to imagine what my own celebration would be like in 2 years. I should have known better. When my turn came, the response couldn't have been more different. I'd worked hard to maintain good grades, joined clubs, and even took extra courses to boost my college applications. But none of that seemed to matter. College? Mom's laugh was sharp and dismissive when I brought up the subject. Stella, be realistic. We just can't afford to send you to. Besides, you're not really college material. But what about all the money you saved for Grace? I asked, my voice shaking. Dad cleared his throat uncomfortably. That was different. Grace had a clear path, exceptional grades. Well, you're more suited for practical work. Speaking of which, I could use another waitress at the cafe. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I could work while studying, I pleaded. Please, just help me get started. We could borrow from relatives, or take out a loan. I'll pay back every penny with interest. I'll even get it in writing with a lawyer. We never borrow from anyone in principle, Mom said coldly. We don't borrow money, and we're not going to change our principles for you. You need to accept your limitations and find a suitable job. I spent that night crying in my room, but by morning, determination had replaced my tears. I went to the only people who had ever truly seen me, my grandparents. Grandpa, Grandma, I need your help, I explained everything through tears at their kitchen table. I can't just give up on college. I can't. Grandpa's eyes were filled with a mixture of anger and sadness. We don't have savings, sweetheart, but let me see what I can do. No grandchild of mine is going to have their dreams crushed like this. The next few weeks were a roller coaster of emotions. First, the disappointment of the bank rejecting the loan application. Then, the shocking moment when Grandpa announced he was selling their old country house and the plot of land it sat on. The sale of the property provided exactly enough for my college tuition. I applied to study investment management in a city far from home, as far as I could get from the constant reminders of my family's lack of faith in me. The day I left, Mom and Dad didn't even come to say goodbye. Only my grandparents stood at the bus station, Grandma hugging me tight while Grandpa wiped away what he tried to pretend weren't tears. From that day forward, I cut ties with my parents completely. When breaks came and I had to return to town, I stayed with my grandparents in their now smaller house. Their sacrifice meant everything to me, and every time I walked into their modest home, I was reminded of what real family support looked like. After 4 years of hard work, I finally graduated with my degree in investment management. I returned to my hometown with big dreams and a freshly printed diploma, but reality hit hard. The job market wasn't exactly welcoming to new graduates, and I spent weeks sending out applications without any promising responses. Eventually, I landed a position at a small trading company. It wasn't the prestigious investment firm I'd imagined working for, but it was a start. I found a modest apartment on the outskirts of town, nothing fancy, but it was mine, paid for with my own money. Then came the call I never expected. "Stella?" Grace's voice was sugary sweet on the phone. "It's been ages. You should come over for dinner this weekend. I'd love to catch up." Something in her tone should have warned me, but I agreed. Maybe time had changed things. Maybe we could finally have a real relationship as adults. I couldn't have been more wrong. When I arrived at Grace's house that evening, I immediately knew I'd walked into a trap. My parents were already there, along with Grace's boyfriend, a slick-looking guy in an expensive suit who barely acknowledged my existence. The interrogation began as soon as we sat down to eat. "So, Stella," Mom started, her fork poised midair, "tell us about this job of yours." "I'm working at a trading company," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's small, but..." Grace cut in with a laugh. "Trading company? You mean like those discount stores? Honestly, you didn't need a college degree for that. Anyone could walk in off the street and get that job." Unlike Grace, Mom beamed, "who's a manager at the Citibank. And Thomas here is a lawyer with Anderson and Pierce." Grace's boyfriend nodded smugly. "Top law firm in the state." "I told you college wasn't necessary for you, dear," Mom sighed. "Such a waste of your grandfather's property." Dad chuckled, swirling his wine glass. "Hey, my offer still stands. I could use an educated waitress at the cafe. Think how impressed the customers would be. Would you like fries with that? From someone with a college degree." They all laughed, except me. I stared at my plate, pushing the food around, just like I used to do as a child. "Where did you say you're living now?" Grace asked, though I hadn't mentioned it yet. "I found a place on Cedar Street," I replied quietly. The table erupted in theatrical gasps. "Cedar Street?" Grace's eyes widened in mock concern. "Oh, Stella, that's literally the worst neighborhood in the city. Only..." She paused for effect. "Well, you know, people who can't afford better live there." "Beggars, she means beggars," Mom stage whispered, and they all laughed again. Something inside me snapped. For years of distance hadn't changed anything. They were still the same cruel, judgmental people they'd always been. I stood up so abruptly, my chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You know what? I'd rather be a beggar than be like any of you," I spat out. "At least I got where I am on my own, without riding on someone else's coattails or living off Daddy's money." I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, ignoring their protests and accusations. As I walked out into the night, I promised myself it would be the last time I ever set foot in their presence. Life has a funny way of surprising you just when you think you've hit a dead end. I was still working at the small trading company, doing my best but feeling stuck, when my phone rang one afternoon. It was Lisa, my old college roommate. "Stella, you're not going to believe this," she was practically shouting with excitement. "Remember how we always talked about working for Maxwell Investment Group? They're opening an office in your city, and they're looking for fresh talent. I already put in a good word for you." My heart started racing. Maxwell was one of the biggest names in investment management. I spent that night updating my resume and the next week preparing for the interview. When I walked into their temporary office, I felt like everything in my life had been leading to this moment. The interview wasn't easy. They grilled me on everything from market trends to specific investment strategies. But all those extra hours I'd put in at my current job, all the additional research I'd done in my free time, it all paid off. A week later, I got the call. I was in. From day one, I threw myself into the work. While others went home at 5, I stayed late, developing new investment strategies and refining my project proposals. My first major project was managing a portfolio for a mid-sized tech company. When it yielded a 40% return in the first quarter, people started noticing. "Stella, this is exceptional work," my supervisor said during my 6-month review. Along with his praise came a bonus that was larger than my entire year's salary at the previous company. But it wasn't enough. I worked harder, took on bigger projects, built a reputation for turning struggling investments into gold mines. The bonuses kept getting bigger, and I had a plan for every penny. 2 years after starting at Maxwell, I walked into a luxury car dealership. The salesman probably thought I was lost until I pointed to their top-of-the-line model and said, "I'll take that one." An hour later, I was pulling up to my grandparents' house in a gleaming new car, complete with a giant red bow on top. Grandpa's jaw dropped when I handed him the keys. But I wasn't done. The next month, I closed on a stunning apartment in the Heights, the most prestigious new development in the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows, marble countertops, and a view that made you feel like you owned the whole city. I was walking out of my building one morning, coffee in hand, when I heard a familiar voice. "Stella?" Grace stood there in her designer workout gear, looking like she'd seen a ghost. "What are you doing here?" I took a slow sip of my coffee, savoring the moment. "Oh, I live here," I said casually, pointing to the penthouse level of the building. "Just bought it, actually." The look on Grace's face was priceless, a mixture of disbelief, shock, and something else. For the first time in our lives, I saw envy in my perfect sister's eyes. A week after my encounter with Grace, my phone rang. Seeing my parents' number on the screen was surprising enough. They hadn't called me in years. Even more surprising was that they were in the neighborhood and wanted to stop by. I agreed, more out of curiosity than anything else. When they walked into my apartment, their expressions were priceless. Mom's eyes darted from the panoramic windows to the designer furniture, while Dad stood awkwardly in the entrance, as if afraid to touch anything. "This is quite impressive," Mom managed, running her finger along my marble kitchen counter. "You must be doing very well for yourself." "I am," I replied simply, offering them seats on my Italian leather sofa. They exchanged glances before Mom cleared her throat. "Well, we actually have some news. Grace is engaged to Thomas. They announced it last month at the engagement party." An engagement party I hadn't been invited to, of course. "They're planning the wedding for 6 months from now," Mom continued, her voice getting that familiar wheedling tone I remembered from childhood. "We've offered to pay half the expenses, as is traditional." Dad shifted uncomfortably. "But it seems the total budget is, well, it's $300,000. I nearly choked on my water. $300,000? "Thomas's family has certain expectations," Mom explained quickly. "They're very prominent in the community. We announced we'd cover half before we knew the amount, and now..." She trailed off, looking at me meaningfully. "Now you need $150,000, I finished for her." "Exactly," Mom brightened. "And since you're doing so well, living in this beautiful apartment, working at such a prestigious firm, you want me to give you the money," I said flatly. "Loan," Dad interjected. "We're asking for a loan. We'll pay you back, of course. We'll even get it notarized." "We know it's a lot," Mom said quickly, "but we can't back out now. It would be so embarrassing with Thomas's family." They're expecting a certain standard. Like when I wanted to go to college? I interrupted. When I begged you for help? When I offered to sign a legal document promising to pay you back? Mom's face flushed. That was different. Different how? Because it was me asking? Because you told me you don't borrow money on principle? Stella, be reasonable, Dad started. Reasonable? I stood up. Like you were reasonable when you told me I wasn't college material? When you offered me a waitress job instead of helping me get an education? When you let Grandpa sell his property to help me, while you saved all your money for Grace? That's not fair, Mom protested. No, what's not fair is that you're only here because you need something from me. You didn't invite me to the engagement party, you haven't spoken to me in years, and now you want $150,000? I walked to the door and opened it. I don't loan money on principle. I believe that's a family tradition, isn't it? Mom's face turned red with anger. How dare you throw our words back at us? After everything we've done for you. Everything you've done for me? I laughed bitterly. Please leave, now. They stormed out, Mom muttering about ingratitude and Dad avoiding eye contact. As I closed the door behind them, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in my life, I'd stood up to them on my own terms, in my own home, from a position of strength. My phone rang again the next day. This time it was Grace. What is wrong with you? She didn't even bother with a hello. Mom told me what happened. How can you be so selfish? I sat back in my office chair, watching the sunset through my panoramic windows. Selfish? That's rich coming from you, Grace. We're family, Stella. Family helps each other. You have the money, everyone knows you're doing well now. Why won't you help with my wedding? I could almost laugh at the absurdity. Family? Now suddenly I'm family? What about when I was visiting your house and you all called me a beggar? When you mocked where I lived? When you laughed at my job? Was I family then? That was different, Grace protested. We were just teasing. You're being ridiculous now. No, what's ridiculous is that none of you spoke to me for years until you needed something. If you need money so badly, why don't you ask our parents? They're your real family, after all. They made that clear enough over the years. You bitter, ungrateful bitch, Grace exploded. You think you're so much better than us now with your fancy apartment and your big job? You're still the same pathetic little sister who was never good enough. The line went dead as she hung up. I sat there for a moment, surprised to find that her words didn't hurt anymore. They just made me tired. A week later, I was having Sunday dinner at my grandparents' house, a tradition I'd kept up ever since college. Grandma was unusually quiet as she served the pot roast. Your parents called us yesterday, Grandpa finally said, his voice heavy. I put down my fork. Let me guess, they asked for money for the wedding? Grandma nodded. They're getting desperate, I think. Your mother had quite a lot to say about family obligations. When we told them we're retired and don't have that kind of money, Grandpa continued, your mother had the nerve to suggest we sell something. She said, well, you sold the land for Stella's college, didn't you? She suggested we sell the car. The car I gave you? I was stunned. She actually suggested you sell your gift? That's when I hung up on her, Grandpa said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. Told her that unlike some people, we don't sell gifts from family members who actually care about us. Grandma reached across the table and squeezed my hand. The three of us sat there in understanding silence, bound together by something stronger than mere blood ties. Word travels fast in a small town, and my parents made sure it traveled even faster. Within weeks, their version of events had spread through our entire extended family and social circle. I started hearing snippets of their carefully crafted narrative from various sources. Did you hear about the younger daughter? My mother's friend loudly gossiped at the local grocery store, not realizing I was in the next aisle. Got some fancy job and now she thinks she's too good for her own family. Won't even speak to them anymore, says they're too poor for her now. At church, relatives would shoot disapproving glances my way when I visited with my grandparents. My Aunt Martha called one evening, heavy with judgment. "Your mother told me you wouldn't even let her into your apartment when she came to visit. How could you treat your own mother that way?" I could have corrected the record. Could have told everyone how my parents had only reached out when they needed money, how they'd never supported my dreams, how they'd mocked and belittled me at every turn. But I'd learned long ago that trying to defend yourself against toxic people only gives them more ammunition. Instead, I focused on my work, spent time with my grandparents, and let the gossip swirl around me like autumn leaves in the wind. My grandparents knew the truth, they'd lived through every moment of it with me, and that was enough. But with 2 weeks left before the wedding, Grace made one final attempt. She showed up at my apartment unannounced, wearing her most expensive outfit and her most convincing smile. "Stella, we need to talk," she said, brushing past me into the living room. "This has gone on long enough. We're sisters, we shouldn't be fighting like this." I stood by the window, arms crossed, watching her settle herself on my sofa as if she owned it. "Why are you really here, Grace?" "To make peace." She gave me her best pageant winner smile. "And, to help you understand the situation better. You see, Thomas's parents are not just rich, they're old money. They have connections everywhere. The wedding has to be perfect." I waited, knowing there was more. "The final payments are due next week, the restaurant deposit, the wedding planner's fee, the flowers." She twisted her engagement ring nervously. "If Mom and Dad can't contribute their share, it's going to be so embarrassing. Thomas's parents will find out they couldn't afford it. It won't just reflect badly on Mom and Dad, it'll reflect on me. On my future with Thomas. So this visit isn't really about reconciling. It's about the money." "No." "Well, yes, but..." She stood up and walked over to me, placing her hand on my arm. "Stella, please. You're my sister, I need your help. We need to make a great impression on Thomas's parents." I gently removed her hand, walked to the door, and opened it. "I don't care about impressing Thomas's parents. I don't care about your perfect wedding. And I definitely don't care what any of you think anymore. You're making a huge mistake," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "You'll regret this." I smiled, feeling genuinely at peace. "No, Grace. For the first time in my life, I'm absolutely certain I won't." A few days after Grace's visit, my phone lit up with a text from Sarah, her college friend who'd always been kind to me. She thought I should know what had happened at the country club the previous evening. "Your parents finally had to come clean to Thomas's family," she wrote. "They couldn't dodge the wedding planner's calls anymore." It was apparently quite a scene. I could picture it clearly, the elegant country club dining room, Thomas's wealthy parents in their designer clothes, the moment my parents had to admit they couldn't afford their share of the wedding expenses. According to Sarah, Thomas's mother had practically turned purple with rage. The carefully planned fairy tale wedding began to unravel. The honeymoon suite in the Maldives, cancelled. The vintage champagne order, scaled back. The designer flower arrangements, simplified. Thomas's parents eventually agreed to cover all the expenses themselves, but the damage was done. The wedding did go forward, though scaled down from its original grandeur. I wasn't invited, of course, but I didn't expect to be. My grandparents received an invitation but declined to attend, sending a polite note about prior commitments. We spent that Saturday together instead, having a picnic in their backyard, steadfastly avoiding any mention of the event taking place across town. A week later, the wedding photos appeared on social media. I found myself scrolling through them one evening, wine glass in hand, studying the faces in each carefully staged shot. There was Grace in her designer gown. Thomas looked stiff and formal, his family arranged around him like expensive statues. And my parents, they were easy to spot in their new outfits, probably bought on credit, trying so hard to look like they belonged in this world of old money and country club memberships. But their smiles were strained, their poses awkward. Thomas's parents appeared in only a few photos, their expressions ranging from barely concealed disdain to outright displeasure. In one particularly telling shot, his mother was caught looking at my parents with the kind of expression usually reserved for something unpleasant found on the bottom of one's shoe. Sarah texted me updates occasionally in the weeks that followed. Grace and Thomas moved into a house his parents had bought them as a wedding gift. My parents rarely visited. Apparently, they weren't quite what Thomas's family had envisioned for Sunday dinners. I haven't spoken to my parents or Grace since before the wedding. I doubt I ever will again. But sitting here in my apartment, watching the sunset paint the city sky in shades of gold, I finally feel at peace with that fact. Some bridges, once burned, should stay ashes. From my earliest memories, the contrast between how they treated me and my younger sister Katie was stark and painful. My name is Emily, and this is the story of how my own family betrayed me, and how I rose above it all. Katie was born just a year after me, and from the moment she arrived, it was clear she would be the golden child. Our parents, Mark and Sarah Harrison, showered her with attention while I lingered in the shadows. Every milestone, every achievement, every moment seemed to revolve around Katie. I remember my 10th birthday vividly. While Katie had received a lavish party with bouncy castles and professional entertainers just months before, my celebration consisted of a simple cake after dinner. "We're a bit tight on money this month," Emily, Mom had said, though somehow they managed to buy Katie a new iPad the following week. The disparity went beyond material things. When Katie spoke at dinner, our parents hung on her every word. When I tried to share my day, Dad would often cut me off with a distracted "that's nice, honey," while scrolling through his phone. The weight of their indifference was crushing. But the most frustrating part was the food situation. Katie had a severe peanut allergy, and instead of just managing her diet separately, my parents enforced a complete peanut ban in our house. I loved peanut butter sandwiches. They were my favorite lunch, but I wasn't allowed to have them, even at school. "It's not fair," I remember telling my grandmother Rose one afternoon while helping her bake cookies. "Why do I have to eat everything Katie eats? I don't have allergies." Grandma Rose was my sanctuary, the one person who saw me for who I was. Her warm kitchen became my refuge, a place where I could speak freely without fear of being dismissed or overlooked. "Your parents are making a mistake, sweetheart," she'd say, her wise eyes filled with understanding. "They think they're doing what's best, but they're not seeing how it affects you." I watched her measure flour into a bowl, the familiar motions comforting. Yesterday, Mom bought Katie new dance shoes because she said she might want to take lessons. But when I asked to join the science club, she said it was too expensive. Grandma Rose's face hardened. "I've tried talking to your mother about this, Emily. Just last week, I told her she needs to treat you both equally." "But Sarah," she sighed, shaking her head. "She claims Katie is more talented, more outgoing. Says you're too introverted, that it's harder to connect with you." Her words stung, but they weren't surprising. I'd overheard similar conversations before, my parents discussing how Katie was the special one, the daughter with all the potential. Meanwhile, I was just there. The quiet one, the less talented one. The one they had to accommodate but never really saw. While Katie's schedule was packed with dance classes, piano lessons, and art workshops, I spent my afternoons alone in my room, watching life pass by through my window. "Katie has such natural talent," Mom would gush at dinner. "Her dance instructor says she could go professional someday." Dad would beam with pride, while I pushed my food around my plate, invisible as always. But everything changed when I turned 12. Grandma Rose showed up one Saturday morning, her eyes twinkling with excitement. "Get your coat, Emily," she announced. "I've enrolled you in the Advanced Young Scientists program at the community center." That program changed my life. Suddenly, I was immersed in a world of experiments, equations, and endless possibilities. Our instructor, Dr. Chen, didn't see a quiet introvert, he saw a curious mind hungry for knowledge. When I correctly solved a complex algebra problem in my first week, he high-fived me in front of the whole class. By 14, I wasn't just excelling in science and math, I was standing at podiums, articulating arguments about climate change and social justice. People actually listened when I spoke. The shy girl who used to hide in her room was gone, replaced by someone confident, someone with opinions and the courage to express them. Emily's presentation on renewable energy was outstanding, my debate coach told my parents at a school meeting. She has a real future in scientific research if she wants it. I'll never forget Katie's face that day, the way her smile tightened, her eyes narrowed. She wasn't used to sharing the spotlight, and my growing popularity at school clearly bothered her. The changes were obvious to everyone. People started stopping by my locker between classes. I was elected to the student council. Suddenly, I had friends who valued my opinions, who invited me to study groups and weekend hangouts. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. That's when Katie started her whisper campaign. "Mom, Dad," I heard her one evening, her voice dripping with fake concern. "I saw Emily behind the gym today. She was kissing Tommy Martinez. And last week, it was Jake from her debate team." I burst into the kitchen. "That's a lie. I've never." "Katie wouldn't make this up," Mom cut me off. "She's worried about you, Emily. These boys, these late-night study sessions, it's not appropriate." "But I'm just..." "No more going out after 6, Dad announced. And we'll be monitoring your phone calls from now on. It's for your own good, Emily." "What about my debate team meetings? My science club?" "You can participate in school activities," Mom said. "But afterward, you come straight home. No exceptions." I looked at Katie, who was hiding a smirk behind her hand. She'd won again, and we both knew it. My newfound freedom was being stripped away, all because of her lies. As we grew up, Katie's antagonism toward me grew more pronounced. It wasn't enough for her to control my social life through our parents, she started targeting my belongings and the few friendships I'd managed to maintain despite the restrictions. One morning, I found my science project drenched in water, the careful calculations I'd spent weeks on bleeding into illegible smears. Another time, my favorite sweater, a birthday gift from Grandma Rose, mysteriously ended up with bleach stains. But the worst was what she did to my friendship with Rachel. We'd been close since middle school, bonding over our love of biology and bad reality TV shows. Rachel was one of the few friends who stuck by me despite Katie's previous rumors, but even she had her breaking point. "How could you?" Rachel confronted me one day at my locker, her eyes filled with tears. "Katie told me everything, how you write about Matt in your diary, how you're planning to steal him from me." "Rachel, that's insane. I don't even have a diary, and I've never." But Rachel was already walking away, leaving me standing alone in the hallway. That evening, I cornered Katie in her room. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded. "Why do you have to destroy everything good in my life?" "You're paranoid, Emily," she replied coolly. "Maybe if you stopped obsessing over me and making up stories, you'd have more friends." I wanted to scream. Somehow, she always managed to twist things around, making me sound like the crazy one. And our parents? They never questioned her version of events. Then came Katie's 15th birthday. Mom spent days preparing for it, determined to make it perfect. The house was decorated with pink and gold balloons, and relatives filled every corner of our living room. The cake was Mom's masterpiece, 3 tiers of vanilla buttercream, Katie's favorite. Everyone gathered around to sing "Happy Birthday," and Katie blew out her candles to enthusiastic applause. But something was wrong. After a few bites, Katie's face changed. Her hand went to her throat, her eyes widening in panic. Mom recognized the signs immediately, an allergic reaction. "The EpiPen," Dad shouted, already running for Katie's emergency kit. Mom held Katie's hand while Dad administered the injection, and gradually, her breathing steadied. The party atmosphere evaporated instantly. Relatives huddled in concerned groups, while my parents tried to understand what had happened. "How did peanuts get in the cake?" Mom kept asking, checking and rechecking her recipe. I was so careful. That's when Katie spoke up, her voice still raspy. I saw Emily in the kitchen earlier. She was doing something with the cake. What? No, I protested. I wasn't even near the cake. But Katie pressed on. Check her purse, she whispered. The blue one, by the door. Dad grabbed my purse before I could react. And there it was, a small jar of peanut butter, one I'd never seen before, sitting right on top of my wallet. She could have died, Dad's voice boomed through the living room. What were you thinking, Emily? I stood there, trembling, as my parents hurled accusations at me. The jar of peanut butter in Dad's hand might as well have been a smoking gun. I didn't do it, I repeated, my voice getting smaller each time. Please, you have to believe me. Katie sat on the couch, an oxygen mask still near her face, but I caught the slight upturn of her lips. She was enjoying this, enjoying watching my world crumble around me. Our relatives shifted uncomfortably, whispering among themselves. Aunt Jane pulled her daughter closer, as if I might try to poison her next. Uncle Bob wouldn't even meet my eyes. The only person who moved toward me instead of away was Grandma Rose. Now wait just a minute, Grandma's voice cut through the chaos. Everyone needs to calm down and think about this rationally. Did anyone see Emily put it there? This needs to be properly investigated. Everything is already clear, Dad interrupted. Emily, go to your room. We'll deal with this later. The next few days were a nightmare. At home, my parents acted like I was invisible. They'd leave the room when I entered, lock away all the food, and whisper behind closed doors. At school, word spread quickly. People moved away when I walked down the hallways, as if attempted murder was contagious. After 3 days of this torture, I couldn't take it anymore. I found Katie alone in her room, scrolling through her phone. You need to tell them the truth, I said, closing the door behind me. This has gone far enough. Katie looked up, and the smile she gave me was chilling. You know what's funny, she said, setting her phone down. I've been planning this for months. Waiting for the perfect moment. The birthday party was just perfect timing. Something snapped inside me. Years of pent-up frustration, anger, and hurt exploded. I lunged at her, grabbing her shoulders. We crashed to the floor, knocking over her bedside lamp. The noise brought our parents running. They found us wrestling on the ground, both screaming. She confessed, I shouted as Dad pulled me off Katie. She just told me she planned the whole thing. She planted the peanut butter in my purse. Stop lying, Katie shrieked, crocodile tears already flowing. See? She's crazy. She attacked me. That's enough. Mom's voice was ice cold. Pack your things, Emily. We can't have you in this house anymore. What? No, please. You're dangerous, Dad declared. We'll call your grandmother. Either she picks you up by morning, or we're calling social services. I fell to my knees, begging them to listen, to understand. But their faces were stone. Katie stood behind them, and through my tears, I could see her satisfied smile. Grandma arrived at dawn, her ancient station wagon idling in our driveway. As I loaded my hastily packed bags into her car, she confronted my parents one last time. What you're doing is despicable, she told them. You're choosing to believe a lie over your own daughter. Someday you'll realize what you've done, and it'll be too late. They didn't respond. They just stood in the doorway, Katie between them, watching as Grandma drove me away from the only home I'd ever known. Living with Grandma Rose was like finally being able to breathe after years of suffocation. Within a month, she had legally adopted me, handled all the paperwork for my transfer to Riverside High School, and converted her sewing room into my bedroom. At Riverside, nobody knew about the birthday party incident or Katie's lies. I was just the new girl with good grades and a quiet smile. Slowly, I started making friends again, real friends this time, who didn't have Katie whispering poison in their ears. I threw myself into my studies with renewed passion. Without Katie's drama and my parents' constant criticism, I flourished. My SAT scores were nearly perfect. I graduated as valedictorian, my speech focusing on resilience and the power of second chances. My parents didn't come to the graduation ceremony. I'd sent them an invitation, more out of formality than hope, but received no response. It hurt, but less than I expected. Grandma Rose's proud tears as I accepted my diploma meant more than their absence. I'd been accepted to several prestigious medical programs, but the tuition fees were daunting. Before I could even mention student loans, Grandma Rose pulled out a folder. "I've been saving for this since you were 12, she said, showing me her college fund for me. "I always knew you were meant for great things." Those 4 years of dental school were intense but rewarding. I lived in a tiny apartment near campus, worked part-time at a cafe, and studied until my eyes burned. Through it all, Grandma Rose was my rock, listening to my excited phone calls about successful procedures, and never once doubting my chosen path. I had no contact with my parents or Katie during this time. Sometimes I'd see updates about them on social media: Katie's job at a local retail store, Mom's garden club awards, Dad's bowling league victories. I'd scroll past them quickly, refusing to let their lives intersect with mine. Finally, after years of hard work, I held my dental license in my hands. My first job offer came from Brighton Dental Associates, one of the most respected private practices in the city. I posted a photo of my diploma and license on Facebook, adding a simple caption: "Dr. Emily Harrison, DDS. Dreams do come true." The response was overwhelming. Old school friends, distant relatives, even my third-grade teacher left congratulatory comments. Aunt Jane, who'd pulled her daughter away from me at that fateful birthday party, wrote, "We're all so proud of you, Emily." Uncle Bob posted, "Incredible achievement, kiddo." Looking at those messages, I realized something profound. I'd done more than just survive my family's betrayal, I'd transformed it into fuel for my success. My phone rang on a quiet Sunday afternoon. The number was familiar, though I hadn't seen it flash across my screen in years. "Mom." My hand shook as I debated whether to answer. "Hello?" I finally said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Emily, sweetie." Mom's voice was syrupy sweet, the tone she used to use when asking Katie's teachers for deadline extensions. "We saw your announcement about becoming a dentist. We're so proud of you." I said nothing, waiting. "We've been thinking about you," she continued, filling my silence. "Your father and I, well, we'd love to have you over for dinner. Just to catch up. As a family." I shouldn't have agreed. Every instinct told me to decline. But curiosity, or maybe that stubborn little part of me that still craved their approval, won out. "What time?" I heard myself asking. The next evening, I pulled up to my childhood home in my new Mercedes. The house looked smaller than I remembered, the paint peeling slightly around the windows. I dressed carefully: designer blouse, tailored pants, the pearl earrings Grandma Rose had given me for graduation. Armor, in its own way. Mom opened the door before I could knock. "Emily." She moved as if to hug me, then seemed to think better of it. Come in, you look so professional." Dad stood awkwardly in the living room. "Hey, kiddo." He'd aged more than I expected, his hair completely gray now, new lines around his eyes. "Is Katie joining us?" I asked, noting the table was set for 3. "Oh, no, she's busy tonight," Mom said quickly. "I made your favorite, pot roast." "Well, what used to be your favorite?" Dinner was a strange dance of forced smiles and careful questions. They asked about dental school, about my practice, about where I was living now. I answered politely but briefly, offering no openings for deeper conversation. "So," Dad said, pushing his potatoes around his plate, "dentistry must be lucrative?" And there it was. "I do all right," I replied neutrally. "She drives a Mercedes, Mark," Mom commented, as if I wasn't sitting right there. "And you mentioned an apartment, Emily?" "Yes, I bought a place downtown." "With a mortgage, of course." They exchanged glances. Mom set down her fork with a sigh that seemed rehearsed. Emily, we've been having some difficulties, she began. Your father, well, the company downsized last month. And my arthritis is making it harder to maintain my full schedule at the salon. That must be tough, I said, taking a sip of water. We were wondering. Dad cleared his throat. That is, maybe you could. Have you asked Katie for help? I interrupted. Mom's face fell. Katie's struggling too. Retail doesn't pay much, and she's barely making ends meet as it is. I placed my napkin on the table and stood up. Well, I'm sorry to hear about your situation, but I won't be able to help. I heard them calling after me as I walked to my car, but I didn't look back. The message from Mom came during my lunch break at the clinic. Emily, we need $20,000. Your father and I are about to lose the house. As our daughter, you have an obligation to help us. I stared at my phone, a strange calm settling over me. Finally, an opportunity. I'll give you the money, I typed back, on one condition: publicly admit on social media that I never put peanuts in Katie's birthday cake. Admit that you threw me out of the house because of Katie's lies. Tell everyone the truth. The typing bubble appeared and disappeared several times. Finally, after what seemed like hours, her response came through: we can't do that. It would destroy our family's reputation in the community. People would judge us. Surely you understand? I laughed without humor. Then you understand that I won't be giving you any money. Surely you understand? The response was immediate this time: after everything we've done for you. I turned off my phone and went back to work. 2 hours later, during my afternoon break, I saw Katie's name light up my screen. Something made me hit the record button before answering. Hello, Katie. You heartless bitch, she snarled, her voice dripping with venom. Mom's crying because of you. They're about to lose everything, and you're playing games? I'm not playing games, I replied calmly. I'm asking for the truth. I want them to admit what they did to me. What you did to me. Never going to happen, sis. You know why? Because it would hurt me. And they'll never do anything to hurt their precious Katie. Her voice took on a sing-song quality. They've always loved me more, you know. Even after I told them about the peanut butter. My heart stopped. What do you mean? Oh, didn't you know? She laughed again, the sound chilling. A few months after you left, I told them I planted that jar in your purse. They didn't even care. Dad just said it was probably for the best that you were gone anyway. That's how much they prefer me over you. My hands were shaking, but I kept my voice steady. You admitted it to them? Of course I did. I was so proud of my plan, I had to tell someone. And guess what? They didn't care. Each word was punctuated with malicious glee. They'll never admit it publicly because it would make me look bad. So you can forget about your little confession demand. The line went dead. I sat there, staring at my phone, the recording safely saved. After all these years, I finally had proof. My sister's voice, admitting to everything: the setup, the lies, our parents' willful blindness. With steady hands, I crafted the Facebook post that would change everything. No dramatics, no accusations, just the truth, finally set free. Many of you remember the incident at my sister's 15th birthday party, I wrote. The day my parents kicked me out of their house for allegedly trying to harm my sister with peanuts. For years, I've carried the weight of that false accusation. Today, I'm sharing my story not out of vengeance, but because the truth deserves to be heard. I detailed everything: the years of favoritism, Katie's escalating lies, my parents' blind devotion to her. I explained how they'd recently reached out, not to apologize, but to demand $20,000 from me. And now, I wrote, I have proof of what really happened that day. Listen to this recent conversation with my sister. I attached the audio file. Katie's voice, clear as day, bragging about planting the peanut butter in my purse. Admitting that our parents knew the truth but chose to protect her anyway. The cruel laugh as she described their indifference to ruining my life. Within minutes, the post exploded. Aunt Jane wrote a lengthy apology. Uncle Bob called me directly, his voice thick with tears as he expressed his regret for believing the lies. Even my old friend Rachel reached out, finally understanding why our friendship had really ended. Then came the angry messages from my family. "Take that down immediately," Mom demanded via text. "You're destroying this family," Dad bellowed in a voicemail. "I'll sue you for recording me without permission," Katie threatened. I responded to them all with the same message: all communications are being recorded and archived. My lawyer has copies of everything. Any threats or harassment will be dealt with legally. Please do not contact me again unless it's through proper legal channels. They must have finally realized I wasn't that powerless teenage girl anymore. The messages stopped. The calls ended. The social media harassment ceased. Grandma Rose came over the night after I made the post, carrying a bottle of champagne. "To the truth," she said, pouring us each a glass. "And to you, my brave girl. I couldn't have done any of this without you," I told her, fighting back tears. "You were the only one who believed in me when everyone else turned away." She took my hand, her eyes bright with pride. "I never doubted you for a second. And look at you now, successful, strong, finally free of their lies. Do you think they'll ever admit what they did? Try to make amends?" Grandma Rose shook her head. "Some people would rather live with their lies than face the truth about themselves. But that's their burden to bear, not yours." She was right, of course. She usually is. My parents and Katie chose their path long ago, just as I chose mine. They'll have to live with the consequences of their choices, just as I built a life from mine. These days, I focus on my practice, my friends, and my relationship with Grandma Rose, the one true parent I've ever known. The past doesn't haunt me anymore.